everybody to the very first ever Room Rumble, and I'm excited for this one. This is fantastic. So for those of you who are new and wondering what is this reverse Room Rumble, what's it all about? It was basically based on a concept that I had, an idea, and that was to go to people's rooms that disagreed with me theologically, philosophically, socio-politically, and just present secular humanist ideas and atheist philosophies to them, and wait for the inevitable disagreements. I went in with a few rules, and I mentioned a playlist in my video description if you do want to check out all of the Room Rumbles that I did. I originally called it Reid's Royal Room Rumble because I'm a nerd and I love alliteration. So that's what I originally called it. But I think that I really went in just trying to have some good conversations, some differences in opinion. I did go in with a few rules. Rule number one is that I would abide by all of the rules set forth by the room, and basically respect everything that they've everything that they've laid down as their base rules. So this means no swearing on Christian channels, or if they say, no, you can't come in, then abide by that. Basically just abide by whatever rules were there, while still maintaining my own opinions and my own beliefs, of course. I tried to be as respectful as possible, although, things get heated and everybody understands that. So, but try to be as respectful as possible under the circumstances of disagreement. Another one was I wouldn't collect a bunch of people to invade a room en masse, basically. So I wouldn't grab a bunch of people. I was going in there alone, and whoever was there, and I wouldn't bring people to help me. And the last one was I wouldn't go in there to change the topic. I wouldn't go into a room about the death penalty and try and change it to atheism. So I would basically only go in when I wanted to talk about that topic. They were free to change it all they want, but I wouldn't go in there with the intention to subvert the topic of the room. And this led to an interesting series of engagements of basically it was more or less Mark Reid versus the room, and it got interesting. And sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes there were people in there that agreed with me, other atheists, or sometimes it was an atheist room. But that led to the suggestion, I think it was by Stephen Boland, to reverse it the other way around and have people come into my room. And this is the result of that. So I think the way that I'm going to run it is that I'm not sure how many people are going to come here to be on. I sent out an email to just about everybody on my contacts list saying, hey, this room's going to be open. What it'll be is basically I'll give anybody a chance to join. You can come and talk on the topic. I will be giving priority to those people whose rooms that I have rumbled. So there's been people that I've descended on, like Praise I Am and Matters Now, Stephen Boland's rooms, Proverbs Guy. There's a lot of people who I've sort of, gone in and sort of done a room rumble. So I really want to give them the chance to return the favor or get revenge, or experience the difficulty, however you choose to phrase it. So so if we do have less places, there are 10, but if we do have less places, I may ask somebody to exit in order to make place for somebody whose room we have rumbled. And I really hope that they'll be brave enough to do what I do on a regular basis, because I've been told that it would be really easy to enter a room by yourself where everybody disagrees you. I'm kind of inclined to disagree. But experience it for yourself. And I hope you can sort of have a good conversation, a respectful conversation. But before I get started with the open room, what I'll be doing is just presenting where I'm coming from. And I did up a very small presentation, so I can sort of just say, hey, this is my perspective on it. So if you just bear with me, I'm gonna be talking about it. So the topic of the conversation is basically what's God and what do they want, essentially. So This is a very, very broad question. So I wanna go over just quickly what it means to me, what my position is. Just one second. I see you in the background there, Oz. I'll get you on as soon as I'm finished this presentation, mate. But I will, you absolutely have a reserved spot. That's not a problem. It isn't very long. Don't stress. It isn't that long. It's not like a full one. Okay, so Joe, first thing to remember, this is just my perspective, right? So this is just my opinions, and I want to give everyone a chance to answer the question, and I will do so to the best of my ability. I will have questions. I'm sure others will have questions, but I ask everyone to be patient and allow people to express themselves and let them get their ideas out before questioning them. I will stop people if they lay down too many concepts at once or if they're going off topic too far, but I want some leeway for everyone to sort of explain what your position is. I hope we can have a good exchange of ideas and opinions, putting forth why we believe in a God or don't believe in a God and find common ground for discussion. So first off, I think it'd be best if I give a definition of what I mean by when I say a God. So you know what I mean when I say that word. So I have been giving some thought to what constitutes a God and what definition I ought to give it. This definition is very vague, but I believe it will include many God concepts that have been offered throughout history. It would include Greek gods like Zeus and Poseidon, who transcend earthly bounds by having access to Hades and Mount Olympus, or the Norse ones that have access to Valhalla. But the Mount Olympus gods and the Norse gods, they're not creator gods. They didn't create the universe. It would include any gods that did not create humans as well, but have some sort of power to alter the natural world at will from their own personal power, which seems to be a theme of gods. You may disagree or feel like the God you're talking about has more specific or other attributes, and I encourage you to share them so I know what concept of God that you're talking about. Please note this very well. The definition is a conceptual one. Just as I can describe the concept of a cloak of invisibility as a fabric enchanted with magic to make the user invisible to all that observe them, providing this definition does not, and I want to stress this, it does not mean that I think that either the cloak or a God actually exists. So what is a God really? So we can update my definition here to include that it is conceptual and is purported by humans, making a more accurate definition of what I think a God is. And this turns out to be the human-made purported concept of any agent that is partially or fully transcendent of our material or physical reality and is claimed to possess enough personal power to alter or perform actions in violation of the natural laws of the universe. How did we get gods? It seems to have started in the Paleolithic area when simple burials by anatomically modern hominids who emigrated from Africa to the Middle East roughly about 100,000 years ago. The precursor of religion and gods was animism, the primitive belief that natural phenomena are powered by spirit or supernatural means, a kind of primal force, as the natural means were unknown to the peoples of the time. I think that the ability to placate animistic spirits as a comforting mechanism slowly gave way to interactions asking for intercession on the follower's behalf. This can be things like, instead of giving a sacrifice to the primal force to avoid drought or end winter, it's asking the primal force for a good harvest or to cure specific people of an illness. With this extra communication came the idea that the primal force is not so much a spirit, but rather a person or agent with goals that can be discussed and a mind that can be appealed to. This is the anthropomorphization of the primal force, which would be polytheism, like asking Poseidon not to flood or Thor to abate a storm for a ship. I think the anthropomorphization of these primal supernatural forces also coincided with an agricultural revolution and the need for authority over larger social structures. A particular deity in any pantheon, much like the Greek patron gods, could be seen as the prime authority and later be elevated to the sole divinity, as seen with the Canaanite religions with El, Asherah, and Yahweh, supplanting Baal and Moloch, and then being combined to the classic Judeo god we are familiar with. This purported agent then gives authority to exercise power over a region and allows one group to become the dominant one with the authority of that god behind them. Can a conceptual god want anything? No, absolutely not. It's just conceptual. It doesn't want or desire anything at all. So how do we know what a god wants? Why the variability in what God or gods want throughout history, and even in the modern day between denominations and religions? It seems that largely what you believe gods wants is determined by the denomination you're born into and how the culture is shaped. The ideas long ago in near Middle East of what God wanted seem to be vastly different than today of what a god wanted. And we seem to be filtering through this through a lens of current society. So I'd proffer that a god always seems to want what the people in the religion want, which is filtered by culture, education, experience, indoctrination, dogma. How do we know that the specific things that a god wants is in fact the things that each religion and indeed each denomination says they want? I want you to keep in mind that not just what people say a god wants, but how they know what a god wants. And just one last few things, just some questions I'd like you to ask if we do hear from somebody that is sort of telling us about a god. Are the purported wants of a god compatible with each other? Do the wants of a god align with the healthy and fulfilled humans? And this is really important. Is the wants of a god being successful good for us? Is the purported god looking to improve the world or destroy it? If someone is wrong about the purpose of a god, would that be bad for society? Thank you. And that's all I wanted to do on that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I will get on Oz, my first guest. How are you doing, mate?
I'm taking notes, dude. That was a good slide. So I really like that. I realized I should take notes.
Oh, you don't have to. I can send you the thing if you want.
Oh yeah.
I will put I will put the join link in chat. Just give me 1 second to write it up. But while I'm doing that, Oz, do you have any thoughts on the subject, like what or who or what a god is, and what do they want?
I think I more narrowly define God to some type of creator being that has agency, where you more broadly define it as some supernatural agency. And so you include more type of God concepts like Zeus and Thor and stuff like that. So whereas I probably wouldn't necessarily include those as a god, I would include those as like a supernatural agent, which I still don't believe exists.
No. So you wouldn't think that the Greek gods are really gods in sort of a classical sense kind of thing?
Right. I think God entails like the ability to create like something new out of nothing really, but maybe not. Like Mormons believe that God creates from existing material, and I wouldn't deny that is a god.
Right.
But yeah, but maybe it sounds more like an alien than a god, really, conceptually.
To me, the Mormon gods do sound more like alien figures than gods. I think it's the violation of the natural laws, because even though most of the Greek gods didn't create anything like a universe or humans or anything like that, like you do have the legend of Athene turning Arachnia into a spider, and clear violations of natural laws. So they do have, and the one thing that I thought about, I thought, well, that could include magic as well. But I think I would differentiate between magic being somebody accessing some other power and the god having the power to violate those laws themselves. So I think as a vague sort of definition it would hold. I certainly would accept the argument that the Greek gods and the Norse gods then don't have enough power to be called gods, because they seem very tied to the material world. even if they can access some places that humans can't. They can be killed. They can be, hurt. They can give into despair. They seem very ungodlike.
Fallible.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they sound more like the superhuman class. But if you look at like the basic definition of God, it would be like a superhuman being, or like the classical definition of a God, which is like the creator type being.
Right.
So I'm okay with either definition. I just more, when I do these type of atheist versus theist arguments, I typically go with the creator type of being with some type of agency, and
Yeah, sure.
usually creation from nothing. And I when it comes to knowledge too, like I still would claim that I have certainty for certain type of claims where I think I'm completely warranted to believe I exist. And it's that old like argument where I can see one hand. If I'm warranted to believe anything, is that this hand exists, this hand exists. And it was actually a theist, I think, that made that argument. I can't remember his name, but that was the gist of the argument. Like, if I'm warranted to believe anything, it's at least two things. My two hands exist external to like my mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but when we sort of say warranted, the problem is that sort of theists kind of get into black and white thinking that if you can't have some sort of absolute certainty, then you can't have knowledge, and I think that's sort of a false sort of position. Like, you know, and even the theist that says you can't have absolute certainty lives their life as if they do. They still don't just walk out into traffic thinking it's all illusory. So
Right.
I think that there's a certain amount of pragmatism that you've got to do. I mean, we're not going to go into solipsism and stuff, but yeah, I know, I get what you're saying, Oz.
Yeah, pragmatic naturalism. I know we've talked about it before, but there's tons of papers that come out about pragmatic naturalism. I actually got a book. I bought it. It has like 14 different papers on pragmatic naturalism. I'm working through. I need to finish it, but
Yeah.
Different concepts of the and it's sort of like a form of realism. The way I look at it is sort of like a way to bridge anti-realism with realism without like totally committing to either concept. It's sort of like recognizing that I can't entirely divorce myself from my own personal subjective experience of the world, but I can't ignore that there is an objective world that's separate from my own subjective experience.
Or at least that's what it appears to be.
Right. And I know this sounds nerdy as hell.
No. I want to get everybody's opinion on this. Like, so Rodney, if you have opinion, what constitutes God? What do gods want?
I think I took an approach a lot like yours. Like I really kind of like I really thought about like what is my stance, why, how, like I went through all of that. And I'm sure I've said it at least in your company before, but I take an atheistic stance, what it's known as evidentialism, or being an evidentialist, where I look for more concrete evidence for the existence of a God in order to have any kind of belief in a God. And since I
What's your
don't
alternative?
see, I'm sorry.
Well, what's the alternative? The alternative is presuppositionalism.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, so when I say that, I would need evidence of a God, I'm saying something like not just something that I could experience personally. It would need to be something that is demonstrable to more than just myself, more than just me would be able, would be able to need to interact with it, to observe it It wouldn't be something that's personal to me or to somebody else. It would need to be a physical or at least an interactable deity, God thing, for me to say, okay, accept that, yeah, okay, this is a God. This is a God. And I've worded it in the past, which thanks to Ozian, I've kind of updated the verbiage about it. But I've said in the past that I wouldn't believe in the God. I would know that there's a God. But when I say believe, I mean believe by faith. Because as Ozian has pointed out, that is that all beliefs
No.
claims to knowledge, or
All
all knowledge
knowledge,
claims to belief.
all knowledge are beliefs. So beliefs
Yeah.
can be justified by evidence. So beliefs. So I don't know if you understood me completely, but all beliefs are usually justified for some reason. It's either
Mhm.
feelings or intuition or evidence. All a belief
Yeah.
is a proposition you accept as true. So
Exactly.
knowledge would be a
Yeah.
justified true belief, and it could be through pragmatism. So you
Yeah.
can accept it as like some type of JTB plus, like.
Mhm.
But if it's through luck, it's not really a good pathway to truth.
Yeah.
So
And off of that stance,
yeah.
I have developed the
JTB means justified true belief, by the way, for everybody out there. It's sort of the standard definition of what knowledge is.
Yeah.
yeah, and it was is through this this stance that I take, where because I don't see any evidence for there being a God, I assert that there is not one, at least as described by current religions of the world, because as they all describe, we have no evidence for. But I see, like, because of the faith that I came out of, and that's the only one I ever try and speak authoritatively or definitively on, because that's the only one I have knowledge of. So I don't, try and step into areas that I'm not educated on. But in the realm that I have come out of, independent fundamental Baptists, one of the key aspects of God is that he desires to be worshipped, especially by those who follow him. And I kind of reasoned out after a while, after departing from the faith, that if a God desires worship, then that God would make themselves known. Else you wouldn't know to worship that God. And because I don't see anything that says, "Hey, worship this specific one God," I don't. And I don't believe that a God that desires worship exists. There could very well be a God that doesn't desire worship that exists, but then, why worship that God if it doesn't desire it? And when I was thinking about all, and I was writing it all down, I went probably a little too far into it, but it was a little fun at the time. Um, but I looked at like, what does God want? And I was like, okay, well, and like I made a list of 5 things that God wants, and I answered that for myself, where God wants, of course, the worship and the adoration, um, uh, but also God wants obedience. He wants a relationship and fellowship, as according to the belief that I've come out of. Um, Justice and righteousness. God wants repentance, redemption. He wants people to have a purpose through the mission that he's given his followers. And I can elaborate on that if you wish, but all those things, like, God wants these things specifically of the people on this planet right here, right now. And because of that, and I look at all these things, and to me, like, all these things seem kind of self-serving. They're all specifically for that God, and so I see that, and I think, well, God seems kind of narcissistic. God seems very self-serving. God seems like it's do things my way or get eternally punished in hell, right? And so I think that this version of God is narcissistic and evil.
That's fair. Bit of truth. Do you want to
Hi.
have a stab at the questions? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. How about you? I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
good,
I'm kind
man.
of have influenza, so just I just joined. Yeah, I don't believe in God. Why? There is a lot of reasons. The reason beyond that the religions who's are presenting the God, they says the God he knows everything. But when we look at the holy books, they are talking about the sun is orbiting Earth, which is completely wrong. And who find out this one? We know that that's the guy. He find out the Earth is rotating due to the Earth rotation, and Earth is orbiting sun, not the sun is orbiting Earth. Not only this, but even though if you look at the human anatomy, when we are drinking or when we are eating food, we are getting chalk. And over 5,000 people died only in US because of choking. And it's only US I'm talking about. Across the world, it's a large number. So if there is an intelligent designer, which some people like are trying to put it in as an intelligent designer, then it's a question to the God that how that stupid design he make it, that we have to we shouldn't have like a one connection with two pipes. One is a wind pipe, the other is digestion pipe. The other thing, if you look at our lumbar, our spines, we got lumbar issues, we got spine issues, we have to go through the surgery sometimes. This is really stupid design again. There is out of I'm just telling like a couple of out of thousands. We have genetic mutations that pass on to the offsprings, and our children's died and our children suffer from the disease. If this is really an intelligent designer, then there shouldn't be anything like that. I mean, I can explain more than that. So I disagree with the God idea. God, he needs to punishment. God, he needs a sacrifice. The animals, uh, and God, he knows everything, but God, he knows nothing. So this is like stupid idea, and it's about invented 5,000 years ago. Before there was no religion. If you look at 5,000 years ago, there was no religion. The first religion was Hinduism, and then the second was Judaism, might be third was Christianity, and then Islam, and they all are false. So I think it's not a good idea to believe in God. And if there is God exists, then that God never contacted us. He never care about us. So then we even don't have to worry about that. That's all I wanna say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Siddharth Nair, welcome. How are you today?
Hello all.
Amazing. Siddharth?
Oops.
Nope. Well, obviously, I hope you're doing better then, if that's the case. Yeah, I think that yeah. So everyone's sort of yours is more specifically talking about the no problem, Siddharth. No problem, mate. No
So
problem at all.
one more thing, I have challenged James Tour like multiple times, and um I was thinking if he can accept my challenge and come on YouTube, let's debate evolution versus creation. I
Who?
definitely will show the people where is the origin of life, because he keeps trying to debunk origin of life, and he's talking about the primordial soup, abiogenesis, and he keeps talking about it's like misrepresenting science.
Hold on,
So,
Peter. Who are you
yeah,
challenging?
James
James
Stewart.
Tour.
James
James
Stewart,
James
Tour,
Tour.
yeah.
the
I
chemist.
know he is a biochemist in PhD.
Yes.
He might not.
Yeah, I
debate
don't
you.
think he would debate anybody
I
that isn't sort of
can
yeah.
He
can I
debated
quote
only. Sure.
can I quote like William Lane Craig like specifically? So and James Tour claims to be agnostic when it comes to if abiogenesis is supernatural or natural, sort of. Like, he believes it's probably supernatural, but he claims he's agnostic about it. William Lane Craig, I just read a paper from William Lane Craig. William Lane Craig believes in evolution. He believes that we have genetic defects and that all that stuff is true. And he's agnostic about abiogenesis. He claims in his writings that he doesn't know if abiogenesis is supernatural or not. He just knows that the creation of the universe was supernatural, and that either by necessity life formed or God intervened to create the first life. But he knows that there must be a abiogenesis event. Same thing with James Tour. Most Christians accept there is an abiogenesis event. Whether they believe it was supernatural or not is a question within Christian theology. So, like, to say that evolution or abiogenesis falsifies God, I don't think is a fair argument to make. It depends on the theology.
Something that I'm going to address up front that is going to come up is why do we sit around talking about God so much? And that's going to be a question that comes up time and time and time again. So would anybody like to tell us why we're sitting around talking about God so much as atheists?
Well, if I may,
Sure.
as an atheist, using the term attached to myself a little lightly, but as an atheistic believer, I don't think that just like sitting around and talking about God is necessarily a bad thing. It's something that permutates through almost every society, some kind of God or deist or deity. And so it's just something that kind of we're brought up in, and it's mentioned, it's around, and so it becomes a thought. And as somebody who has come out of having a faith in a God of some sort, it stands to reason that I would in some way mention a God, in whether a belief or lack of belief in a God, mostly to either make my stance on the matter clear, or to answer a question that somebody else has posed to me. But as for just sitting around a room full of atheists talking about a non-belief in a God, or what is a God, or who is God, I think it's more of a well, I don't want to speak for everybody. I think personally it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, where we're trying to kind of maybe steel man in a weird kind of way, Christian or Muslim or whatever, you know, whatever religion or whatever God you follow. We're trying to maybe steel man their position a little bit, and then explain why that doesn't work for us.
Well, basically, the faith is like just a blind. There is no single evidence. The atheism, yeah, we believe in evidence. If something changed, we will take that. If something really straight and further, if it changed, we wouldn't be shy to say that, okay, no, we are not gonna take that, now we are gonna take the other. The problem with the religions, they cannot make a U-turn, they cannot change their statements. If they make if they agree on something, yeah, this is wrong in Quran or in Bible or in any religion book, then their religion is collapsed, and that's the reason they are doing the interpretation. They are calling us that we all.
I don't agree with you on that. For a start, not all atheists would follow the evidence kind of thing. All that you require to be an atheist is to not believe in a God. That's all that's required. So there's certainly some atheists out there that believe in UFOs or believe in magic or believe in spiritual stuff without a God being involved.
Yeah,
Secondly,
or other supernatural things. Yeah.
or other supernatural things. And secondly, like when you say they can't change, religions can't change, I think that the Catholic Church has done a complete 180 on some of its beliefs. Like, for instance, the gay issue, they've just accepted gay marriage and things like that. So I think they kind of can, but generally it takes a whole load of pressure from the rest of society. So
But
I
it's
think
not
they
from
can. They just
it's not from the original text. I'm talking about the original text. The
Well, the
text,
original text,
whatever the original text, whatever they claim to be from the God, it's never been changed, never had any issue. I'm quoting that like sun is orbiting earth is flat, and a lot of bunch of errors which is in the holy books, like in Quran or any book. They can't change it. There is no way they can accept that yes, the earth is not flat, earth is globe. No, the sun is not orbiting earth, but the earth is orbiting sun. And like God
Bitter.
created.
I think just a second. I think you're painting with a really broad brush there, because most Muslims, Christians, most theists accept that the Earth is a globe and that even evolution is true. Most just accept that. So I'm
Yeah,
not
but
sure. I
they
get that you're sort of pointing it at a very specific group, but you're sort of
yeah,
saying, using very
this
general statements.
no, I got you. But the thing is, they are doing interpretation. What I'm saying, they are not
and you
saying
wait,
they are not
bitter. Bitter, really quick. Where in the Quran or the Bible does it say evolution is false? What specific point does it say
when they
evolution must be false? Where does it say that
when
specifically?
the first human was Adam, right?
So
And
wait,
the
really
first
quick.
women.
Let's stop right there. Let's stop with Adam. Where does it say that Adam can't be allegorical?
No, it says God made Adam, and
Okay, no,
the
but we're
Eve
talking
created
about
from
Adam.
his ribs.
Let's talk about Adam specifically. We're just talking about Adam
Okay, I got you.
Eve and
I got
Eve
you.
being
Okay,
created from
okay,
his
okay.
ribs. Where does it say that Adam and Eve can't be allegorical?
No, the first human
Well, I think
was.
that's Bitter's point, like that you
I
have to
really
take it
don't
as an
think
allegory to accept that.
Where does it
it's
say it
not
has to be
even-
taken literally? Where does it say
This
it has
is
to be taken
completely
literally?
wrong.
Hold on.
Ozzy, I think I feel like you're not atheist.
No,
I'm sorry.
I
No,
am
this-
an
yeah,
I feel
atheist.
like
doesn't make-
twice.
No,
I feel
I am an
twice.
atheist. Please don't call me a
You,
liar.
I don't
Wait,
think. I
bitter
don't
truth.
think.
Do you believe God doesn't exist, or do you just lack a belief in God, or do you believe God doesn't exist?
I don't believe in God. But if there is a God who never contacted
Okay.
us, then we don't need that God. Then
Let's be more clear here. I believe that God does not exist. I'm an atheist.
okay, yeah.
Okay, so
Same my
we're clear
position.
now. I'm an atheist. Okay, so where does it say in the Quran or the Old Testament that you must interpret those texts literally?
I would have to check, and let me just share with you. Just have to search the words in Quran or in Bible, but it's written in Quran and in Bible as well that the first creation, the Adam was made by the God hand, and the Adam was made by the sand or something like that. So I would have to check that, but it's written there.
If I
You
if I
You are
may,
just
go ahead.
if I may, the question was that you had posed at first there, Oz, was where in the Bible or the Quran does it say that evolution didn't happen, or I guess where it contradicts the thought of evolution, and I guess simply put that it can't or it doesn't, because even if we grant a 6,000 year Earth, even if we grant a 44 to 4,600 year ago flood, even if we grant all of these things, evolution still happens. It's a fact of nature that it happens, because mutations happen, genetic drift happens, all the markers of evolution, the things that drive evolution, do happen, because it's a naturalistic process that even then a God would have put into to motion. So even if we grant creation, even if we give that, then evolution still happens. So I guess in that light, would the Bible still then say
No,
that
I'm
evolution
asking.
can't happen?
Okay, let's see this.
I'm asking.
See,
no, that's
see
not
the
what I'm
words.
asking. I'm
Okay.
asking specifically. I'm not asking for a fundamentalist translation of the Bible, literal translation of the Bible. Where in the Bible does it say you have to translate the Bible to mean that the earth is 6,000 years old?
Okay.
Why can't you interpret the Bible to be allegorical? Because he has passages in there, a day is unto God, as 1,000 years as under man. Why can't a Christian accept that the universe is ancient and that the earth is ancient? Because most Christians do.
And I think Methodists do a really good job of this, by the way. Like we were saying earlier, how like some things, or I think Bitter was saying that the text doesn't change, but I think Mark was making the point that other people do change, like the faiths
Yeah, they
follow
just
the text
interpret. That's
do
true.
in fact change.
Because they know
Amongst the Christians, I think the Methodists have done a really good job of adapting and changing.
And well, Bitter, I want to ask this. Like, so it sounds like to me, and I don't want to sort of put words into your mouth or sort of misconstrue what you're saying, but it sounds like to me that you're sort of saying that as theists they ought to take their book literally, as it stands as a literal thing.
Can you repeat again, please?
It sounds like, just to me, from my perspective, that you're sort of saying, well, if they're Christians and purport that the Bible is true, then they ought to take that book literally. Like that the story of Adam and Eve was an actual story of describing things that happened.
That's right. It's written even in Quran. I just put it in the text. You can see we created man from sounding clay, from mud, molded into shape. It's chapter 15, verse 26 in Quran. So it's written there. It's pretty clear.
Well, most theists would sort of say, hey, that's a story that explains where we came from, but it's not actually literal. It's just a story that people made up.
Now they are making interpretation. They are just doing interpretation because they know there is evolution happening, and things are changing. That's the reason the modern Muslims or the Christians, they are accepting that in this way, that no, this is just metaphor. This is not the truth.
Bitter, I don't think you're understanding our question. We're asking for a passage that says it must be interpreted literally. The quote you posted there does not say it must be interpreted literally. It's just another quote about another thing you are interpreting literally, but there's nothing, you haven't posted anything that says everything in the Quran must be interpreted literally, because every Muslim I've ever talked to says part of the Quran is interpreted literally and part of the Quran is interpreted allegorically. So, and allegorically means not literally, not strictly. They don't really mean what it says. Like,
and just to steelman some other positions, some of them sort of say it's a spiritual truth and not an actual truth kind of thing. They'll say that, hey, that's the spirit or the feeling of the peoples at the time, but it's not actually literally true.
The problem is the Quran translation is not only happened or any religion textbook translation just not happened today, but it's over years, overs of hundreds of years. And the translation, if you look at the actual translation like Tafsir ibn Kathir or the Tafsir Jalalain, you will come to find that there is a lot of differences in the translations. Even the textbooks have different type of textbooks. So now the modern Muslims, they come to know that, okay, there is an error, like embryology. Quranic embryology is talking about the sperm turn into the blood clot, and blood clot turn into the flesh, lump of flesh, and then it turns into the bone, and bone dressed with the flesh, which is completely wrong again. So it was the Galen who thought in this way. But when we come to know that it's never stay in a uterus, but it goes into the fallopian tube, and it just penetrate the egg and fertilize the egg, and then egg travel towards to the uterus, and it attached to the endometrium, and then embryonic stages started. So this is all false. Sperm never turn into the blood clot. So there is a bunch of things. Yeah,
bitter. You do realize, though, that doesn't disprove a God, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
doesn't even
these are just
disprove the
writings of
Quran.
primitive people who didn't know better.
It doesn't even disprove Islam. It doesn't disprove the Quran, because it could be, that passage could just be the best knowledge that they wrote down at the time. The best you could say was, like, that's just the way they understood it at the time, I guess. It worked for what they had at the time.
So the God knowledge was this much limited. Then the people needs to update that knowledge.
I'm not a Muslim apologist, but I've heard them make well, let me finish. I've heard them make apologetics for these type of claims, and they made arguments for them. But when you make up your own argument, that's not their argument. What you're doing is straw manning their argument, right? Like, you're not being honest.
This is not straw manning.
Wait, it is straw manning their argument. Yes, it is.
I don't know why you are thinking in this way. I'm just telling you the verse, and I'm just giving you the exact what it is written in Quran.
Because you're arguing what you think it should be, what you think it should mean. They're arguing what they think it should mean. But when you're telling them how they're supposed to be a Muslim, when you're not a Muslim, it seems a little disingenuous to me.
Well, and plus it's sort of not, some people don't, like, I get what you're saying. Like, everything that you said would apply to the fundamentalist creationists, right? The fundamentalist Muslims or the fundamentalist Christians that believe in the literal word of their holy books. Everything would apply. But not everybody is like that. So a lot of Christians and Muslims, their faith in their God doesn't hinge on the literal interpretation of the Bible. It doesn't. So when you're talking to them and you're sort of saying, hey, your book says this and it's not right, their response is like, well, so what? It's a story that's describing something, but it's not what my faith hinges on. A lot of Christians you run into, their faith hinges on their personal experience, their experience with the Holy Spirit and stuff like that. So that's not going to be useful to sort of say, well, you should think it's literal. Why?
Well, I think the problem, if you only look at the translation, is clearly telling you what exactly is that meaning. And if I do my interpretation, which one do you think is right? The translation or the interpretation? What I think it's like that.
We have to put an interpretation on any translation.
Yeah. Right. So the problem is, you can see it's a white, but I'm saying no, it's a blue. But you can see it's a white color. Why would I say that it's a blue color? Why would you say it's a blue color?
So you're ascribing objectiveness to the text.
You ever hear
whether somebody believes that way or not?
Hear about a dress a few years back that caused some real consternation? Yeah. That was freaky. Did you hear about that? Did you ever see that?
There was a drama about
blue
that.
And gold and white and black.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
white,
like
gold, blue and black,
blue,
and white and gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll show you, because this picture came up and it was just called The Dress, right? Yeah. That's all it was called. And it's insane, but some people saw it as white and gold, and some people saw it as black and blue. Let me see here. I'm just finding the picture for you.
Sure.
Because it's really interesting. I find it absolutely fascinating, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a real good look at like psychology.
Yeah, I found the best way to deconstruct people's views is to get into that white and gold dress and ask them why they believe it's white and gold.
Yeah, I see it as white and gold. My wife
And not
sees it
blue
as
and
black
black.
and blue.
But I would say it's a white and black.
White and black.
Will you take that?
White and black.
If I say it's a white and black, will you take that? You can see
Well, I mean,
it's white and gold, right?
the color wasn't the like which colors you think it is wasn't the entire point of it. It was because people were seeing different colors. There was a whole stir over what color is it actually. Like, what is the actual objective truth of this, and not just what I'm seeing or interpreting.
Right. Okay. And just can you please share my screen just a minute? I just want to show you something interesting.
Because the truth is, some people actually saw it as blue and black. You get that right, Bitter? Like, you legitimately saw it as blue and black. That's the point.
Okay. You just look at this. It's related to the same embryology, and it says it's a hadith. When the drop of semen remain in the womb for 40 or 45 nights. So we know this is wrong. The semen never stay in a uterus for 40 and 45 nights. Then angel, can I read it? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, the angel comes and says, "My Lord, will he be a good or evil?" And both these written would be written. The angel says, "My Lord would be a male or female." So can you believe that something is like that written in the Quran and Hadith? And I would be saying, no, this means this. Oh, this Hadith is weak. These things were authentic for years and years, but now the modern Muslims, they come to realize they all are wrong. So they are just making their obligations that the hadiths are weakened and these hadiths are not related, but they all are related to exact the Quranic text.
Okay, so what happens when they just say, "Hey, that's what Muhammad wrote," and that just is something that he misheard from Allah and got wrong?
Well, that was a hadith. That was something that somebody else wrote, anyways. That wasn't something Muhammad said.
There is
even
another
worse,
hadith.
sort of.
There is another hadith.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I just, like, to somebody who, like, Nadir, who hinges his faith on the Quran being inerrant, right? It's inerrancy that we're talking about here. Like, can the Quran be inerrant and you can still believe in a God? Yes. Can do some people think that the Quran has these things in it and still believe in a God? Yes. You talk to Isa, and he doesn't think that this is an inerrant book with all scientific information on it. He takes it as poetry or a cultural text kind of thing, which I think is the better way to do it, because if you hinge your sort of faith on scientific knowledge in the Quran, you're going to be disappointed sooner or later. But I'm just saying that what you've said, look, Bitter, there's a lot of stuff that you said that absolutely would apply to somebody who's a fundamentalist.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that it only applies to them. It doesn't apply to some Muslim who has other reasons for their faith. It doesn't.
Yeah.
So this is what we're sort of saying when there's a straw man. It would be like saying to you, oh, to be an atheist, you should have some kind of logical defeater for God, right? It's sort of expecting you, because a logical defeater isn't the reason why you don't believe in God, right? Some kind of philosophical syllogism that's logically necessitates the non-existence of God isn't why you believe there's no God. It's lack of evidence, or evidence sort of to the contrary kind of thing. It isn't some kind of logical, set defeater for it. So somebody saying that's the same thing you're doing. You're saying, hey, you should have this thing, when that's not what your belief hinges on.
Oh, okay. I got you. Now I
Okay.
fully understand what you are talking about. Yeah, absolutely correct. Okay, so yeah, there is a logic also. Like I just spoke with
Whoa.
you.
Speak of
Okay.
the
Asa,
devil. Isa, I just mentioned you and then you show up. It's amazing.
There are militant agnostics that tell you you're irrational if you don't have a logical defeater for God to be an atheist, Mark, just to be clear.
Militant agnostics.
Oh, yeah. The philosophical agnostics, where you should withhold judgment on the proposition on whether God exists or does not exist.
Yeah, I don't think that that's required to have a belief in something. I think you just need sufficient evidence to justify it.
I agree.
Okay. Sorry,
They
were you
don't.
finished, Bitter? I don't want to cut you off, mate. Were you finished on that?
So who, me?
Yeah, you.
Oh yeah. So I mean, there is a logical explanation. I just explained a bit earlier that we have a chalking issue, we have lumbar issue. When we are sick, we need to see the doctor. Without seeing the doctor, we cannot be fixed, we cannot get cure. By the preacher, if he come by and he prays for you, it's it does nothing. It won't cure you. If you have a cancer, if you have diabetes, you definitely need medications. um I don't know why Isa Kabir is laughing. I know.
Well, this seems patently obvious to most
Okay,
religious people. Like most religious people would say,
I
yes,
know.
that's absolutely true. I think but it does. But here's the thing: that it does hold weight with some of those people. Like, for instance, I think it's the LDS people who won't get blood transfusions, and
That's Jehovah's Witness.
say a Jehovah's Witness. I'm sorry. Yeah. And someone like Hovind flogging his supplements or something that he does. I heard that at one point. Yeah, apparently so. So these things do hold weight. It's just we have to be careful who we leverage them towards, because they may not hold a lot of weight with who we're talking to. And Isa, I'm so glad you're here. You're the only theist on the panel, and I'm glad one actually had the cojones to show up. And I haven't even rumbled your room, so that's some full on cojones there. But
no,
how are you?
don't mention the deer.
I'm amazed. I'm doing great. I actually heard about it from Robin Webster and the Kentucky Atheist that we were talking. They said you were streaming
Oh,
tonight, so I said I will come in. I promised I would. So here I am.
well, thank you. I really appreciate it. So the sort of topic on the table is who or what or what is God or gods. Like, I just wanted to leave it open to everybody's view about it, and what do they want. So do you have any thoughts on that? Anything to sort of share on that topic?
I mean, it's a good question. It's a tough question because it's like it's sort of a mystery, and I think Dr. J and I would agree on this. The way that you view God is through a concept you can call magical thinking. It's not really there's not really this kind of logical, rational way that you can put it. So, um, I think there's many different forms of what God is, and I guess how I would define it is it's very individual. So it's whatever a person feels their relationship is with this kind of higher power or supernatural being. But I think that's the easiest, most logical academic way of putting it. But I don't think that there's really some standard absolute. A thing that I think is really cool is a thing called I think it's called apotheism or negative theology. That might not be the right word, but negative theology is a really cool thing that you can see in a lot of work with by Rabbi Moses Maimonides, where it's this idea that when you ascribe things to God, that's not what God is. So I think that's a kind of a cool sort of rational way of looking at it. But yeah, it's a huge spectrum of thought.
Autotheism, the doctrine of self-existence of God.
No, negative theology. I'll get you the
No.
word. Give me a second.
Isa, do you believe that God created everything?
Oh,
Wow, that's a heavy duty question.
apophatic
It's
theology.
apophatic. See, I was close. It's
Apophatic. Okay.
So what do you
I'll
mean
post
by
it in
that?
the
The
chat.
actions that God takes are not the God. So are you talking miracles or sort of any kind of interference in the world at all? Like what are we talking about here through actions of God?
I mean, and this is a hard thing because it's like really beyond anybody humans pay grade. Like it's a very difficult situation. I think a lot of people who take a theist point of view can kind of try to make God and put God into a box and say, well, God is sort of like me, God is a person, God has these thoughts and feelings. I guess the way I personally would see it is more God is like a force and kind of an energy that you are kind of connected to. You had asked a question, Bitter Truth, about like what I thought about which thing?
The creation. Do you believe that everything created by God?
It's so funny. I don't really think very much about it. It's not really something that I think a lot about, like the prime mover type of situation. I don't think I really concern myself with those kinds of things. I'm far more focused on living in this moment and at this time. So that's
So
kind of
are you in agnostic position then? Because if you think that you don't know how the God created, then it sounds like you are agnostic.
I mean, it's an interesting question. I just think for me, it's not a primary concern of mine about how we got here. I think a lot of people that is a concern. I'm far more interested in how to live life in this moment and where we're going moving forward as opposed to how we got here. You know, am I
Well, it's
agnostic?
kind of
I don't really think about it. Like that's the point. It's not even that I would say that I take an agnostic position. It's just not really a position of consideration.
okay.
So is like, so you don't think about what effects God has on the world or what kind of impact any God or Allah in particular has on the world?
So, I guess it's not really my particular consideration. No.
That's interesting. And so do you have any idea or any concept of what a God wants or desires, or do you think God has no desire whatsoever? It does sort of sound a little bit like I don't want to misrepresent you, but it sounds sort of like almost an atheist / deist position, that God's sort of removed and you don't sort of investigate him at all.
I mean, it's interesting. I can see that point. I think a lot of people see they need God to sort of justify their existence and where they're going, and I guess it's not really anything. I don't really have that kind of space. Deist, you mentioned atheist. Yeah, I think it just sometimes I think the idea of God is that you just feel it could, you feel there could be a connection to maybe like a force or supernatural energy, as opposed to it being like this kind of very personalized being that does what you want it to do, you know?
So do you think sort of things like panpsychism or sort of the universe being composed of one psyche or one God agency is more towards sort of some sort of monism kind of thing?
I mean, it could be. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem like God taking on different kinds of forms and different kinds of understandings. The only thing I would be concerned of is if people use God as a weapon to like hurt other people, then there's an issue. But you know, if it's something that helps folks feel good and feel supported, I think that's important.
Okay. So I'm gonna say a big shout out to Hooligan who gifted 5 memberships, and we hit Darren Delaney, Reid S, gonna go for it, Peter Guns, Kiss My Duck. I love that name. I will kiss that duck. Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
Isa,
Congratulations. Enjoy your
if I could
emotes.
ask,
Yeah, go ahead.
with your broad conception of God as kind of an energy, I guess that would I be out of line to say that kind of permeates the world or existence? Is that a fair assessment?
I wouldn't have a problem
Find
with that.
things together.
Does this God have a continuous effect on the world? Does this energy God, is there a constant ever moving effect that this God has on the world as we see it?
I mean, it's a possibility. It's not, again, it's not really a major consideration for me, but I mean, it could be. I mean, I think I don't really think that much about it. I'm not like, what makes God God? Like,
You don't get too philosophical about it.
yeah, I don't think that it really matters that much to me personally, you know.
Okay. That's fair.
It's just sort of hard from my perspective because I overthink everything. Sort of all the levels of importance you would have, I'd imagine that would be one of, the question of whether there's a God and what a God wants is probably one of the most important questions ever to be asked. So, no offense, Isa, but it's weird that you sort of go, well, I haven't really thought of. I mean, I even think about all kinds of things. I think about gnomes more than you think about God, apparently. So yeah, it's kind of weird. No offense, I don't, it's just
No, I understand what you mean. I guess I would see God as just sort of this energy and this force that we can kind of connect to, and I don't really.
What type of energy are you talking about? Is this like a electric energy or like a temperature? What kind of energy are you talking about?
I would assume supernatural, something that's not quite measurable.
Yeah, I would say it's
spiritual.
not measurable. It's not like a measurable type of thing.
Are you saying that I do have a pacemaker? We all human and every single living organism is running through that sort of millivolts. Are you talking about that might be the energy?
I mean, it could be. I mean, the thing is, like, the way, like, I think a good metaphor is like you can think of the Force of Star Wars. Like, I think it's you could see God through that kind of lens.
That's my realm of nerdism.
I don't really have a problem with that. I don't. I mean, it's like I don't really could think about this situation. Is God like? I don't think God is like Zeus.
And sometimes we may need to use, external defibrillator. Sometimes we may need to use a pacemaker or a defibrillator to reactivate the heart rhythm. That means we are also implying some voltages just in case if it needs. So then this idea is like dying for me.
It's dying for you? What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, like the way you are talking about its energy, then the God is dying inside. Then you need additional charges to reactivate that God.
Why is that?
Well, when there is a cardiac failure, that when your heart is not working, it's not functioning. Sometimes you might need a pacemaker. Sometimes you may need a defibrillator, right? So why do I need that if there is a God inside and if the power is from the God is there?
Oh, I see what your question is. Your question
Okay,
is,
yeah, thank you.
oh yeah, I was like, what do you mean by the pacemaker and the defibrillator?
Okay.
How are we getting from here? No, what you're basically saying is, if God is everywhere and it's permeating everywhere, so why would you need something like a pacemaker or a defibrillator? Shouldn't this essence of God sustain you? Is that what you're asking? Is that fair? Okay. So the thing is, it's beyond my pay grade. I don't know the mechanisms of what God is or God isn't. And I think that that's an issue. I take a position of humility. I have no idea. I'm not going to say God is this substance or God is not this substance, So
We've got a $5
It's a
super
good
chat
question.
from Pinworm. Thank you so much, Pinworm. Really appreciate it. Believers can't seem to agree on how their God is defined. Yeah, I did have a definition that covers everything, but whether you do agree with that or not is another story. Yeah, I think that there is a lot of disagreement over the definition of a God. And I think there's a lot of people, at least I can respect Isa basically saying that it is mysterious and he doesn't know. Like there's a lot of people who claim to know without explaining how they know. So at least I can sort of respect that.
Or it's just
Okay.
I just know.
So
Right,
why
right.
actually why actually I was asking that, because the believers, they believe in soul. They don't believe that there is something inside our body which is called soul. And but the
it's
soul
soul.
is not the soul is not electric impulses generated in our pacemaker, in our heart. And that's how our lower chamber and upper chamber contract and relax. The same thing happening in our brain, and that's how we are alive. So imagine if our voltages are not there, then we have our soul, then why we die? That's the reason I ask you, why do we need defibrillator or a pacemaker or something like that?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting question. I mean, it is the question is, and I take the position that God knows I don't know what's going on, but I think it's an interesting question in and of itself. What is God? What is the substance of God? And I've listened to a lot of debates on it, and honestly speaking, it sounds a lot like fan fiction debates, like a Star Trek debate, Star Wars debate, where they're like, God does consubstantiation, transubstantiation. I'm like, how do you know any of this stuff? Like you're really, like reaching, because you're talking about stuff that you can't possibly know. I know I don't know. So how do you know? Like they talk about all of these things about the substance of God. Is God a Trinity? Is God Tawheed? I'm like, how do you know that? You can believe
So
stuff, but you can't know it,
if you don't even know what it is, why do you believe it?
I mean, like for me, I mean, the thing is,
Yeah.
I kind of, it's sort of like a standard that I accept, but I mean, I think there's a lot of standards we accept as people that we don't necessarily have factual evidence for. You know what I mean? We do a lot of things that may not be logical or rational, and it's just kind of a standards that we accept in our life.
Well, it sort of ties back into sort of magical thinking, because that's,
Sure.
I mean, it's sort of accepted these days as more superstitious stuff, like lucky rabbit's foot and things like that, or pushing the elevator button to think it comes faster, and that's something that I've done in the past, but I realize that now it is kind of that magical thinking. It's not actually going to do anything. So,
it's not rational. I totally agree. I would not say it's based on rationality and logic.
It's irrational, so you don't even have a concept of it to have a belief.
Well, the thing is, it's interesting that you bring up these other kind of elements of superstition. Like at my job, we have a funny thing. We can't say that it's going to be quiet, because if we say it's going to be quiet, then we're going to have we're going to have to work really hard at night. So I mean, I think we kind
jinx. You're talking about jinxing things. Yeah.
And I think we kind of just accept certain standards in our life, and sometimes do we you mentioned, is it a belief? Maybe it's just a thing that we accept. Is it something that you really focus and fixate on? Could be, maybe not.
That's what I meant by belief.
A lot of people in the chat seem really stuck on this energy thing, Issa. If God is an energy, like what kind of energy is it?
I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
does it have intentionality? Does it have intent?
I mean, the thing is, to be very honest with you, I don't know. I can't answer those. I can't answer what God is or God isn't. I would never. That's the thing. That's when I watch those debates, I can't take that position and say, well, God is this.
This is something a human brain, how he process and how he answers. If he has no idea, he would be interpreting by different way. So it's all human brain, the God created by human, and the the answers are by the interpretation, whatever the interpretation makes feels better. But in reality, there is nothing like that. If this is really a real God, and if something really from the God, and the God is sending the messages, then he will be designing very well our anatomy, and also he will be, helping us. A lot of people died from the hunger. A lot of people died from a very uh, uh, weird disease. So I mean, there is a lot of things to say, but I would be saying that uh, I mean, there is no clue, there is nothing besides just believing in God. If the God is there, then I don't need to go for heart bypass. I don't need to go to see the physician, or I don't need to see
Well,
anybody else. Just
not
bring the
sure that's
preacher and he would be
necessarily
just
the case.
So,
and
so I would have a question to ask about that. So the thing is, I think that we would assume we have to assume certain things about God to make that true. So if we took like a deist perspective of God, where God is a prime mover and
Correct.
then basically takes off, then those issues would not they wouldn't arise. Well, you're basically the premises of that logical argument would be God is omniscient, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent. That those standards would have to be in place for your premise to be true. If isn't that, and God is like a deist God, then you wouldn't. Then that concern wouldn't be
And
necessary.
and that his intervention was desirous for God. Like it could be that you should die, that the better outcome is that you die. You're presuming to know that the better outcome is that you live, because God knows what's going to happen. They
And that's
have
a valid argument. That's a very
they
valid
have
argument. Sure.
because there's theodicies to explain why suffering happens. Theodicies
Very fair. Very fair.
are apologetics to explain why evil happens.
That's actually very
Okay,
so
fair.
just want to
the
quickly,
so
just want to
the
jump
so
in
the
quickly.
minor
Hey,
also
hey, hey,
has
hey,
to
da,
die.
da, 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 da. Just want to jump in quickly and just say thank you, Robin, for the $2. Isa, the only theist brave enough to show up. I kind of agree, but let's see if we get any others. Would be fantastic. But yeah, Isa, much appreciated, mate. And Robin Webster again gifted one readership, and guess who she hit? This is the readership sniper over here. Hit Isa with it. Absolutely hit Isa with it. She called her shot on Isa and then hit her with a random readership. This girl.
YouTube knows. I want to answer your question though, Mark. You asked a question. And
Robin's magical. If there's any evidence of magical thinking, I'm starting to see it with Robin. But I also would like to get on to Siddharth and Deviant Outcast as well, if you don't mind, because I do want to get their opinions on what a God is and what a God wants as well. So Siddharth, first, do you want to put in your hat into the ring, explain what a God is and what a God wants?
Yep. Am I audible? Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a debate going on, so I didn't want to interrupt or anything. So I just like to get all of your thoughts on this, like on my thought, basically. So I heard a couple of people repeatedly asking, like, are you an agnostic or an atheist? The way I would approach this is that like, okay, so just a couple of base assumptions. So by atheism, I'm meaning like a strict negative confirmation on that God doesn't exist, and God can be whatever construct you want to operate under, like, and people have different ideas, so I'll accommodate all of them, right? So you need we don't have that knowledge pool to derive from, to have that absolute atheist view. So if you want to be 100% intellectually honest, like you gotta account for that and be agnostic on like from 100% perspective. Like, you can't, I mean, I haven't been able to, like, I operate as if I'm an atheist, so that's my daily way of living. But if you push me on it and ask me, okay, are you really an atheist? I'd be like, no, I'm probably an agnostic. So I would then identify as an agnostic atheist. But I don't know how appropriate that is, like, if you really push it. So I have never been able to go fully on the atheist route, just because we don't yet know everything. We, like, even if you take all the science that we have, it's all like a couple of centuries, right? More or less, modern science in that way. So I mean, who knows, right? I mean, we just don't know. So I have to be agnostic on that front, right? Is What do you guys think about that?
Well, I would take a different approach, and I understand what you mean. So there's generally with atheism, there's a few definitions thrown around, and colloquially, people will sort of use an atheist as someone that lacks a belief in any god. In philosophy of religion, an atheist is sort of the more hard atheist or strong atheist position, which is they believe there is no God. So it's a little bit different, but an agnostic means you don't know either way. You're unsure of the proposition. But I would sort of say I believe there is no God, and that would be based upon the claims made by theists that a God is an agent or a thinking being, something with a mind and will. Now that mind and will basically means that it has to have a mind. A mind must be present in order to make decisions. And we've seen billions of minds, and none of them, like all of them, have had some sort of physical receptacle to do that thinking. All of them had a brain of some sort. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a God doesn't exist, but it's like, and I use this in a debate, and I think it's a very good argument. If I said, well, I believe that children are born through natural childbirth, you could say, well, you can't be absolutely sure because you've never seen every single child be born. A stork could have brought one of them because you haven't investigated all of them. And I think I have the same level of confidence that there is no God through the millions of minds with brains and none without, as I do that a stork doesn't bring a baby because of the millions of births we've had without a stork and through natural processes. However, I'm not saying that that's logically impossible, but I think I've got enough justification to believe that is the case. Now, it's a provisional belief, so if you can show me a mind without a brain, I would definitely change to being agnostic. But until that happens, I think I've got enough evidence to say, hey, through the induction and the millions of minds that we have, I would say a mind needs a brain.
Yeah, common rebuttal would be like the black swan fallacy, but like you said, it's a humble claim. It's not
And it's
saying
provisional.
Yeah,
correct, and it's provisional. It's also not saying that it's logically impossible for there to be black swans. I'm saying, based upon what I've seen, I believe there's only white swans. I'm not saying I know there are no black swans.
Mark, just to confirm from your response, you kind of define God in this. Let's just approximate it in a classical theistic way, right? Like, let's say something with a consciousness and intention and will and that kind of a God, correct?
If you want a definition, I certainly have a definition of the concept of a God, if you want it.
No, I'm not looking for I mean, I'm just trying to confirm, like,
Okay.
is that the kind of God you meant in your when you were talking about
Yeah, so
your
I define a God as something with agency. So,
Yeah.
if say Isa's God, for instance, if that's just a force with no agency, that's somehow just a spiritual force, I probably wouldn't define that as a God. I see a God as something with desire and well, basically will. It or it has things that it wants to do. Nearly every single definition of a God I've been given fits that mold, and without that agency, without being a agent, I'm not even sure that would refer to a God anymore. rather it would
Yeah,
refer
so
to.
so just to say that, let's say some primordial spring went off somewhere and that caused the Big Bang and all of that, you would not call that spring as a god. Just to say, just
No,
to
I
confirm.
wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I was accounting for all of them because people have like their own personal ideas of what gods are. So if you're talking in that deistic, like the classical deistic way, like Jesus or something, yeah, I would be much more on the atheistic front. I can be much more confident. But when you get in the more
Sure.
philosophical, abstract way of like, okay, what take the complete sample space of what a god can be, and then you ask me like, are you an atheist on all of them? I just don't have that knowledge pool to, like, if I can take all of science available and I would still not have that knowledge pool to make a minus 100% negative claim like that I am an atheist on all those ideas of gods.
No, but as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned, if it doesn't have any agency, then it's not a god, because it would
Sure.
be completely powerless because it can't decide to do anything. It's just completely deterministic. And B, a god to me and to almost everybody else is a personification of something, whether that be a personification of morality or some kind of spiritual power. I don't see how a god would be defined without the agent part. I just can't see that happening.
Yeah, you don't have to accept their definition either. So, like,
Correct.
I had
Yes.
this debate with Kyle Adams where he defined
Ugh.
any man as God. So he defined
Yeah.
me as God, and he asked, "Do I deny that I exist?" I said, "No, it would be trivially true under
Correct.
your definition of God that I am God, but I reject your definition of God because to me, a God is something with a disembodied mind, some type of creator being with
Transcendent.
agency."
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't fit that criteria, so I reject your definition for God. And even under your own view, I wouldn't be your God as a Mormon. So freaking jeez.
Yeah, and sort of, so I mean, I could define this coffee cup as a god, and then I would say, well, then I believe in a god because I believe in the coffee cup. But then that would be a trivial statement to make. It wouldn't be what, somebody who's a theist would be talking about at that point. And if you're defining anything as sort of anything that creates as a god, then all humans are gods. And again, it becomes a triviality. So, it depends on your definition, Siddharth.
My jar has a spirit in it.
It's the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, I mean,
Bad
so
joke.
look,
You're welcome.
if you ask me for my personal definition, like, so I will operate as an atheist, right? Like, I would
Yeah.
say the kind of gods we are talking about. Just I don't, because I mean, I grew up Hindu in a half Christian family surrounded by Muslim Sikhs, and I mean that just goes out of the window, like, the moment you start thinking about it. But
Mhm.
I'm just, that's why I preface that with, when I say God in that thought I was sharing, I meant I'm trying to account for all possible ideas of gods, and
Yeah.
that's the specific role I was uh, speaking under. But yeah, like if you ask me how I live, then yeah, I would just call myself an atheist, right? But yeah, if you're
Mhm.
accounting for all of them, I just don't feel I have anywhere close to the knowledge required to go down that road.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. I'm just going to mute you. You seem to have some feedback, mate. We'll see if we can sort it out by the time we get round to you. But I might go to Deviant Outcast next and ask your opinion and what or who or how is a god, and what do they want from us?
Well, I'd say if I had any answer to that question, I would probably be a believer. I have very hard time to understand what this being would be, where or is it just some sort of vague power, like a what's that called? When you attribute things like the process of birth and death as a god in itself.
Anthropomorphization.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. It's very late here. It's
That's okay.
4:30 in the morning.
Oh wow! Right.
So
Are you in Egypt?
no, I'm in Sweden.
Or
I wish I was in Egypt. I wish.
all the Egyptian imagery. It looks cool.
Yeah, I'm an Egyptologist and a bit of an Egyptomaniac, you could say.
My great grandfather's from Egypt. Funny enough.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, from the 1800s. Yeah, my great grandfather came from the 1800s from Egypt into South Asia. So
Okay, so $100,000 question to you then. Was he a grave robber?
no, my great grandfather's name was Sayyid Abdurrahman. He was, I guess, a sheikh. He was a spiritual guide, and he was a
Cool,
merchant.
yeah.
He was a business.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, he for
Yeah.
sure at least did some shady
Well, I think it just
deals.
probably
Wow.
textiles and.
I
goods
mean,
like that.
it wasn't wrong in the same way as we see it now. So it's not I'm not
Dare you
disparaging it.
accuse somebody's
Maybe I am.
ancestors of being criminal? Says the Australian.
Well, I would say they were sailors. They were like sailors, seafaring folk. You know, that was my folks. They probably sold like textiles and things like that. I don't think that they were in
so
the pure.
prevalent.
Well,
It was
because
so prevalent back there.
my
Back then, I'm so sorry if I offended you. I really.
No, I was just making a
was
joke.
born
that
with
I'm
my foot in
Australian.
my mouth. Okay.
Nobody cares if they ask me if my ancestors were criminals, because they were, all of them.
Mine sure were.
We know.
It's Australia. But you know, the funny thing is, my aunt, there's a masjid there called Sayyid Ahmed Rifai Mosque, and that's like my ancestral space. So like, I have to actually go there because my family would be there. They're like the caretakers of this.
Oh, you haven't
space.
been. You haven't been. You haven't
No, I
been
haven't
there.
been to Egypt. No, I haven't been to Egypt because it just has not happened yet. But I have family there and in South Asia.
Oh, you have to go.
I'm
You
very
have to.
American, as you can tell from my accent. I'm a big United States
Yeah.
guy, but
you know, the world is bigger. So, and you should go there. You should go there.
do you have a family that's Egyptian, or are you like of Egyptian
No,
ancestry?
I am extremely Nordic. I have actual Viking ancestry, and my family has been here since at least the 800.
That's interesting because your accent could pass as like a kind of an Egyptian accent too. I've heard Egyptian people sound like you too.
Oh, really?
Really? I wouldn't know. You know.
No.
I have 8% Nordic ancestry through the UK, I think, but I think it was through invasion.
Yeah.
But hey,
we were there. We were everywhere.
I have a very funny story because my mom's family's all Jewish, like from Eastern Europe. So like my mom's family's Eastern European Jewish, and then my dad's family's like, like South Asian, Egyptian, and a little East African. So it's like it's an interesting blend. So.
Nice.
Isa, were you raised Muslim or did you become Muslim on your own?
So I grew up in like a Sufi background. I don't know if you're familiar with Sufi Islam, but
I don't know like exactly what it is, but I've heard the term.
So it was very like open-minded. It was very focused on having good qualities and being a good human being. That was the way that God was viewed. God was kind of this really friendly force. It was not like God is this being that wants to hurt people. It's very different
Same
They're
with
the
how I
ones
was
that
raised as a Catholic. I wasn't raised to believe that gay people are bad and that trans people are
Exactly.
bad and that abortion is evil and that God's this, monstrous, vindictive, you do something wrong and I'm gonna get you kind of guy. God was that understanding, forgiving, there for
Yes.
you when you need somebody kind of person.
That was the God that I had. It was very
Yep.
like that's the God that I was raised with, and a lot of the people that I grew up with were people from Catholic backgrounds, some Protestant, Jewish. Most of the majority of the people around were all like that. So it was very weird when you come out into the world and you start seeing
And you
like
meet Protestants.
I had a coworker in the Navy who had this huge crisis of faith over evolution, and then the Catholic Church came out in favor of evolution, and like it was so relieved, like because he just could not deny evolution was a real thing. So, but this was back in I guess the 90s.
Yeah, 90s.
Yeah.
That
Well, I'm
happened. Yeah.
older, I'm not as young as some
No,
people.
I grew up during the 90s. That was my time as well. Don't worry
I
about
was into
that.
my 20s then.
Okay, well, you're slightly older than me. That's all right. So I'm going to go to Mark Stoney now,
Hey.
and see what Mark thinks of the question on the table, and see what you think. Do you want to give what is God and what does he, she, it, they want?
Well, from the Christian perspective, God is the creator of everything. And essentially what he wants is an image bearer, representative here on earth to reflect his characteristics. Now, we as humans have fallen from that perfect state, from the original creation. We're cursed, we're condemned to live a life on this cursed planet. But that doesn't mean that we can't live moral lives, we can't do good, we can't have purpose. It's just more challenging than it would have been in the original creation. But regardless of that, we're still his image bearers. We're made in the likeness, created in the likeness and image of God.
I have so many questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of questions in there. So the image bearer, like, so do you believe that God's going to destroy the world?
No.
Okay, so you don't believe in an apocalypse or a cataclysm at all?
No, I believe that the eschatological end times that we read about in the Jewish scriptures and the imminent warnings that we read in the New Testament were related to the events that happened in the first century, relating to Jerusalem and the temple, and basically the economy of how God dealt with man. Whereas before it was exclusively with Israel, the chosen Hebrews, the people, but they rejected their king, their Messiah, and because of that, God basically set them aside and said, "All right, well, I'm going to open up to everybody who believes now." So instead of being through works and deeds and all that, now it's by grace through faith that we're in right communion with God, the Creator.
Can I ask a quick question? Really quick
Sure,
one.
man.
Mark, how old do you think the Earth is?
I have no idea.
So would you be willing to accept the relevant scientific consensus that the Earth is roughly 4.5 billion years old?
I would certainly agree and say that it appears that way.
Okay.
As far as like the actual, empirical age, I can't speak to that.
Okay. That's fair.
Okay.
That's all I had.
When you say we're his image bearer, do you mean like spiritually or physically? Do you believe God
Spiritually.
is? Okay,
I
good.
believe we bear the image of his characteristics, his mercy,
Okay.
his justice, his love, his jealousy, his wrath. All the traits that human beings embody are corrupted mirrors of what God's characteristics are, whether it be his morality, his justice, his wisdom, you name it. We
You'd
have
be,
access to that through him.
be surprised how many Christians I think were physically built in his image, but the good.
No, I think that's silly.
What about death? Do you think do you believe in annihilation, heaven and hell, purgatory? What's your Do you have a
Uh,
position or?
Yeah, so I used to adhere to soul sleep, which was that
Huh.
humans would go to Sheol, and from the Jewish doctrine, that would be like two compartments. You've got Abraham's bosom, you've got Gehenna, which is the fiery pit, the trash heap, or what have you. But since Christ was on the earth, and according to Scripture, he died and led captivity captive. That captivity was those that were dead prior to his sacrifice. But at this point in history and time, we immediately are transfigured to be with Christ in, another, I guess you could call it dimension, we would call it heaven. But as far as unbelievers, I believe that they essentially are completely cast out from the pleasance and all the goodness of God.
Are you some form
So
of Baptist?
Uh, I was raised Baptist, yes. I don't identify with any denominations per se.
That's
I,
fine.
I've
It's
I've been
just
through a bunch of
some
them
of the
though.
things you were saying kind of
So
felt
Sure.
Baptist-y.
Sure.
so separation from God, not eternal torment, but separation is the torment. Is that sort of your?
Well, Scripture says that every good and perfect gift comes from the Father above. So to be separated from all goodness would essentially be torment, would it not?
Well,
For
I
a
think
soul made in the
I
image.
don't think anything is perfectly evil either. So it doesn't make anything
Sure.
sense to
I think the
say
concept
that
of perfect.
anything is perfectly good or evil. So I think everything has aspects of both. Like Leo said, the concept of perfect doesn't even make sense to me. It's sort of
I agree.
conceptually odd.
Yeah, I don't think our brains are capable of conceptualizing true perfection.
I
So
don't think
God's
it's
perfect.
I don't think there's such a thing as not just true perfection, but perfection.
Well,
just at
hold
all.
on a second. Is God perfect, Mark, in your sort of belief system?
Well, he certainly isn't imperfect.
But
Well,
is
then
it
he is
But
perfect.
what
Like,
is the standard? I mean, are you going to
isn't
apply
he
the
the
standard
standard?
of perfection to
I
Isn't
would
God
say
the standard?
that's what I
Because
would say,
he
yes.
is perfect, he would be the standard of perfection.
well,
Sure.
it's kind of odd because it's sort of what I think when I hear that is, why would a perfect God want anything, like have desires for anything? It's because when you desire or want something to happen, it's a lack of that. So if you're perfect, then you wouldn't have anything that you would need to get done or have happen or change in any way.
Well, right, but let's delineate the difference between wants and needs. God doesn't need anything from us. He wants to express himself through us. I see
Why?
no
This is kind of a
reason to
selfish
have
desire, isn't it?
desires. Sure, why not?
this
He's
is why I
jealous
like
too.
Janine Diller. She's a theist philosopher, Christian philosopher. He talks about sufficient being theology, where God, instead of perfect beings theology, because it seems to not make sense to say perfect being because it doesn't conceptually have any meaning. Where
Sure.
sufficient being means it's God has sufficient power to do what God needs to do. Like, so, like, what's it mean to be perfectly good? Like, God is sufficiently good to do what God desires to do. Like, it just makes more sense conceptually than to say God is perfectly good.
I
don't
think
know
we
what that
should
means.
also recognize that it's accepted by most who have analyzed this that if God is omnipotent, then any desire that God has is through no means, through no mechanisms other than God's will alone. So if God desires X, X becomes, X obtains, X
Yeah.
is.
It's kind of part of his omnipotence.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So why does God want anything if he instantly gains it?
I don't know.
It's
I don't know why a being like God would
desires.
desire
Because
anything.
it pleases him.
I don't know how something like God could be pleased beyond, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
just
So
The conception.
how could you ever aspire to be in the image of something you can't even understand? Like, so like you said, we're the image bearer of these concepts. Like, how could we ever be that if we can't even understand what it means to be perfectly good? I don't even know.
Well, we all
Well,
have a
just check
sense
on.
of justice. We all have a sense of right and wrong. We all have a sense of morality.
Sure.
But these are intangible things. So what do we base that on? Would be my question.
Or moral
Well,
intuitions.
it sounds like when you have a being that's perfect that then creates an imperfect species to be in his image, it sounds like you're setting up to fail, because those beings can't possibly be perfect without you making them so. Like, it seems like you're creating a one-wheeled car to move you around. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, does it have to make sense to us? I mean,
Oh,
No.
I guess not. No.
if we want to claim some understanding of it, then yes, that's going to entail the ability to make sense of the thing. So
And
if you want to grant that we can't make sense of God, I mean, I think it's okay for theists to say that, but then you also have to follow that up with, therefore we can understand nothing about God.
And I would press that, because scripture does also say that God is not the author of confusion. Anything that God does must be able to be conceptualized or understood by us, else it be confusing and therein cause confusion by his very act. So
right, but to say that God is
isn't-
not the author of confusion implies that there is an author of confusion, an adversary, so to speak, which
Right.
in Christian theology would be Lucifer or Satan, the adversary to God, which is the father of all lies. And what's more confusing than a lie?
Doesn't
A lot of
perfect
things, actually,
that-
depending on the lie.
And that's what I would ask you is all of the things that are confusing, that is specifically from the adversary, from Satan?
I would say that not only would it be from the adversary of Satan, but also from ourselves. Bible says that men are inventors of wicked and evil things. I don't think we need Satan to sin. I think that by our very nature we are born sinful with carnal desires and
So
lusts of the
that's
flesh.
what God wanted, right? That's why
But-
we're that way, because God wanted it.
Perfect God theology is a man-created thing. It doesn't even come from the Bible. I think wasn't it Anselm or
Saint
whatever?
Anselm that first proposed
Yeah,
the idea of
so-
a perfect being.
So the confusion comes
Right.
from these concepts that were created by the church in the first place. So perfect God theology isn't necessary to be a Christian. You don't have to believe God is a perfect being, like, which to me is a nonsense term. It's like getting a yardstick and not seeing how many feet are on a yardstick. You're just saying, here's a stick that to measure that's an infinite length. We're not going to tell you how to define this concept. We're just
I
going
think
to
Well,
say,
what you're trying to do, Oz, is apply a standard to God, whereas the Christian worldview is that God is the standard.
no, Anselm tried to define a standard of perfection. He
Sure.
did. I'm saying we shouldn't be using his standard to define God. You're using the standard of a man when he used perfect God theology. That's what I'm saying. So why should I use your standard, which is the standard of another man, to define perfection? It seems like Janine, when she talked about sufficient God, like God was sufficient to do the thing, which to me makes more sense. God doesn't have to have infinite power, doesn't have to be omnipotent.
Well, we haven't
God
even
just
gotten to the problem of omnipotence yet.
Yeah.
There's that problem as well.
God
Well, if there's
just
any
has to have a
power-
sufficient power to do what he needed to do.
Sure,
That's it.
but
Problem
if
of
there's any
omnipotence.
power above God, would that not negate his, God status? Is God
Well,
not the
actually,
ultimate
most
supreme being?
Christian theologians would say that that like you had a very powerful being and somehow thought it was God, but then there was a being more powerful than that being, well, then that would have just been God.
Sure.
So that's kind of like a general view that you're going to get, at least amongst a lot of Protestants. Like that's what William Lane Craig says. But I feel like there might be a more underlying problem here. Would you agree that our nature reflects, even if imperfectly, God in his image?
Is that question for me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. But didn't you say that by nature we are sinful?
Yes. But that doesn't mean we're not
Okay.
perfect representatives. We're not perfect
Why aren't we
reflections.
perfect?
Well, because we're born with a sin nature.
Why?
We
Why
inherited
are we born with
Adam's sin
sin
nature
nature?
because Adam was the federal headship of man at the creation. He screwed it up, but there was a redemptive
How did he
plan put
screw
in
it up?
place before the foundation of the world, and that plan was fulfilled in Christ Jesus.
Wait, you're saying that
Like the
God knew
knowledge
that
of
Adam
good
was
and
going to
evil.
do this?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. And did God want Adam to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Okay,
think that
so if
God
God wanted Adam to do
foresaw.
something, and then Adam does the thing God
Okay, Leo,
wants him to
let
do,
him finish talking. Let him finish talking. Yeah, interrupting a little, mate.
We all know
So-
where
Let's
it's
just make
going.
sure we.
Isaiah, I believe
Yeah.
it's 65, says that God declares the end from the beginning. So, in seeing the fall of man and all the tragedy that we see in the Old Testament, and the sacrifice that was made by Jesus, I think we see a picture of not necessarily a what we would define as a perfect plan, but it is the plan that God saw from beginning. So
wait,
yes,
God didn't
he
develop a perfect
saw
plan?
he foresaw
Let him
he
finish,
foresaw the fall
Leo.
of man. He foresaw Adam transgressing in the garden. He foresaw that Adam was the only man created at the beginning, according to Christian theology, and he dropped the ball. So he represented in essence himself, but every man that came after him followed after him in his representation. But like I said before, Jesus came and was resumed that federal headship of man as a representative to God, and his perfect life, which the Bible does describe him as the spotless Lamb of God slain before the foundation of the world. So even that
Well,
in
let's get
itself
Mark.
implies.
Let's get back to the Adam and Eve thing because we've gone all the way.
Can I
I
ask the
get what you're
question
saying.
that I wanted to
Yeah,
ask?
well, I want to make sure we're back on Adam and Eve. And so God foretold Adam, and you had a question about that, Leo.
Yeah, well, I asked him because he said, Adam's the reason that man fell, and then we have the sin in the world and everything. And I asked, did God know that was going to happen? He said yes. And so my next question was, okay, did God want that to happen? And he said yes. And my next question then, and the reason I interrupted was, and I genuinely mean no offense by this, but everything that he said there it's irrelevant to the point that I'm getting at. Which the next question is, how could it be wrong or bad for Adam to do what God wants him to?
Because he was told, don't eat of the fruit of the garden.
But
That
why
was the
would
one and only
God
law he
tell
was given.
somebody not to do something he wants them to do?
Why is there laws against murder? Why is there
That's
laws
not an
against
answer to
anything?
the
Why do we have a
question.
Yeah.
justice system?
That's not an answer to the question. Why would God ask somebody not to do something he wants them to?
Because God also gave man free agency and free will,
That's
in the sense that Adam can
still
act
not
on his
an
own accord.
This is
Yes.
so weird Calvinist argument. Can I
See,
ask
that
a
would make-
question?
that would
I'm a
make sense.
Calvinist.
Wait.
I just want to make this one point, then I'll
Okay.
be done.
That
That
makes
would
sense.
make sense if what Adam did wasn't what God wanted him to do. He acted against
Yeah.
God of his own accord. But using his free will, he just did what you have already admitted God wanted him to. And I just don't understand why God would punish somebody for doing the thing that God wanted them to do in the first place, or why he would tell them not to do it. Go ahead, Oz. I'll leave it there.
I do want to ask a question. I mean, to me, it sounds like a contradiction, so I'm just going to reject it as false. But I do want to ask a question. If I take a gun and I point it at somebody, I pull a trigger, am I responsible for where the bullet goes?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
That's God. So when God dropped Adam off and wanted it and knew exactly what he was going to do, he's the one pulling the trigger. He's the one that intended the outcome. God's responsible for the entire outcome, the moral and immoral acts that happen. God's responsible as a logical entailment of God's initial action. So God's logically responsible for the good and the evil that happened. So,
Well, God says he created the evil. I
Yeah,
have
I'm
no
fine.
problem with God creating the evil.
And I'm
I mean,
fine with that. I'm
What is
fine with
justice
that as
without
long as you accept
transgression?
that.
Right? What is justice without breaking of the law? It's impotent. It's nothing. It's a concept. But God is a God of justice. So he allows law breaking so that he can exhibit his justice through the creation that he made.
But God couldn't have logically have wanted Adam to deny what he wanted him to do when he knew that Adam would do it anyways. So it
Well,
doesn't.
logically, he
how-
could.
how-
It would just be irrational, and God is
Yeah.
never acts irrationally. God is perfectly rational.
Can God change his mind?
Can he? Absolutely can.
In
Does he?
principle,
No.
yes. Yeah, so in principle,
And-
he can, but he just never does.
Well, I mean, he does in the Bible several times.
In the Bible, yes.
Name one.
Name one. Okay,
Mhm.
the story of Jonah, when
Mhm.
God initially planned to destroy the city of Nineveh, but then Jonah
He
preached.
did
the
destroy the
Nineveh,
city of Nineveh.
and then they repented, and God relented. And
Yeah,
did
There's also
and
Moses when he
eventually
came
Nineveh
down with the
was
second.
restored.
Hang on,
or
there was
destroyed.
already
Moses
Moses when he came down with the tablets and he saw the golden calf. God wanted to kill all of them, and Moses convinced him that that would make him look bad in front of the other gods.
Humans
Hezekiah's
having to
prayer for
explain to
healing.
God why things are bad.
when Hezekiah prayed for healing in 2 Kings 20. I mean, there's three
Yeah.
right there. God changed
And
his
and
mind.
God would have been
These three
perfectly
different times.
just in killing all the Israelites that created the golden calf and worship it because it transgressed his law. And he said the wages of sin is
Wait.
death. God would have been perfectly just in punishing
Wait.
any transgressor. It's only by
Wait.
his grace that he doesn't
grace is a
enact
New
his
Testament
justice
thing,
on
not an
every
Old
single one of
Testament
us all. No, it's not.
Wait. You said God is a creator of good and evil. So how do
Yep.
you know it's not? How do you know it's justice and not injustice? Just because he desires it doesn't mean it's good because he can desire evil too.
Mercy is not injustice, it's mercy.
Okay, can God do unjust things? Does God
okay.
do unjust things?
No.
Okay, so just as an aside, so justice and mercy's an exclusion to justice. Like
Yes.
if we decide to imprison someone for an amount of time and then they get a pardon, they're getting mercy. It's a circumvention of justice. So you can't sort of say that mercy is an extension of justice. It doesn't really work like that. It's the suspension of justice.
But it's not injustice.
No, I wouldn't say it's injustice, but the question
that was
still
my point.
remains: how do you know that in if he did slaughter the all of those people, that it would have been justice and not evil he was creating?
Well, God did create evil.
Wait,
Yeah.
hold on here. What do you mean by
Sure.
evil? How do you understand that term?
Evil can be calamity, it can be injustice, it can be hate,
Those are
it can
just like
be
synonyms for
murder.
the word evil. Let me offer a
Well,
definition
what do you
of
want?
evil, and then you tell me if you agree. So
The opposite of good.
I would take, yeah, of course. I would take evil to be that which ought not to be permitted or ought not to occur, all things considered.
But where do you get the ought from? Who
Well,
decides what is
this
ought?
would be coming from an
Doesn't
internal
matter.
critique, so I could just grant you God because this is an internal critique of theism. It would come from God.
Okay. So you still have a standard.
So yeah, but what follows from this is that if it's true that God creates evil, then you're saying that God allows what he knows he shouldn't, and that just seems an irrational move. But God is never irrational. So I don't know what it means to say that
Who
God
are we to say?
created evil, because
Who are
that's
we to
God
say what
creating
should and
things
shouldn't be
God
allowed?
doesn't want. Because God
Who are
doesn't
we?
want evil.
Says who?
Says the Bible. God is morally perfect. God does not want evil things to occur. And in an instance where he did desire them, since he's the standard, then it would just be the case that they're good things. They ought to happen, all things considered. And that's why God desires for them.
I've
So
seen
God-
nothing
may
in
I offer,
scripture
Mark
anywhere
Stoney?
that says that God does not want evil to happen.
May I offer a qualification for evil?
Sure.
Would all sin in the eyes of God be considered evil?
Well, what is sin? Sin is a transgression of God's law.
Okay.
So sin is
To
evil.
deviate from law would be considered evil.
So
Yes.
all sin is considered in the eyes of God evil.
Yes.
Okay, and if God tells us to go forth and sin no more,
And we do.
okay, but God is telling us not to do evil.
Right.
So God doesn't want evil.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't want us to perform evil. No.
Okay, so then
But
why
that
do
doesn't
we?
mean that it doesn't exist. He accounts
Then
for the
why make
fact that people will. He
Well,
even says the hearts of men are desperately wicked. Who can know it?
yeah, but he's
So
the
God
one that
obviously
created us. He
accounts
could
for
have
that.
created us a different way where we don't do those nasty
Well, he
things, right?
could have. He
Yeah,
could
so
have.
then
But
why
he
didn't he?
didn't.
Wouldn't that be better?
Well, then why don't you go try out for God?
Well, I'm not God, but wouldn't it be a better
Exactly.
world if
I
God had created
volunteer.
one where humans
That's
don't sin?
tribute.
Well, go
I
ahead. I mean,
volunteer.
Well, can
Nothing.
I get it? Because that was a serious question.
sure,
Mhm.
sure. So God, his laws aren't for him. It's for us.
I
We're
understand
the
that.
recipients of the law. He's the
I understand
lawgiver.
that.
This
What I'm
isn't
asking
rule
is
by consent. This
what
is
I'm
rule by
asking
authority.
is what I'm asking is if God did not want us, God does not want us to break the rules he created for us. Well, then he could have just created us not to break those rules. Why didn't he do that?
Well, I believe that God loves his justice just as much as he loves his mercy. And
So you're
in
saying
order
God
for him
lets
to
us
practice,
sin
can
so
I
that he can
finish?
be just.
Oh, let
Yeah.
him
Okay.
finish.
Yeah.
Let him
You
finish.
finished it for me there. Yes, God absolutely allows sin so that he can practice his justice.
And is it good for God to be just?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then it's not evil for those sins to occur because they furnish a greater good. So in virtue of that, they are themselves what ought to occur, all things considered.
Well, all
Unless you're
things
saying there's
happen
another
to the
way it
glory of
could have
God.
been done.
All things happen to the glory. God gets glory in his justice just as much as he does in salvation.
Okay.
When sin is punished, he gets glory. When sin is forgiven, he gets glory. I mean, it's kind of a win-win situation for the guy.
This sounds like that what you're saying is that ultimately there isn't any evil in the world because all of it is to God's glory and for God to be just.
Well, it is to God's glory because when
And
evil
is that good?
when evil is avenged, that's a good thing. When a murderer is imprisoned for life or put to death, that's a good thing
So it's
because he's no
good that
longer
people murder so that we can put them in prison for life? Or
that.
should the
No,
murder just not
it's
happen at all?
no, the murder should not happen, but it does. But
Okay.
there is justice, and justice is a representative of God's justice, who says that the punishment of sin is death, the wages of sin is death. Now we're a little soft on that, we put people in prison or give them fines or put them on probation, but God's law is a little more strict than ours, and
Does
that's why I
God
say
want
we're an
people to sin?
imperfect representation of his characteristics.
Does God want humans to sin?
I don't think he wants humans to sin. The Bible
So
does
then
say
why do
that
we? I
it
mean, if he
grieves
wants
him.
us to not sin, then we would just not sin, right? He's all powerful and perfectly rational. He
Well,
gets what
again,
he
like I
wants.
said, he wants to exhibit his grace. He wants to exhibit his mercy. He wants to exhibit his justice. But what are any of those things without sin?
I think
Well,
that
he
those
does
What are
these
these things that
things.
we all, as
So-
humans, would agree are good things? Justice, grace, mercy,
but
love.
they're only
What are
good in
those
Here,
virtue
things
of
I
the
can
without
answer
the
existence of
that.
opposite?
evil, right?
I can answer that. We
How can we
usually
answer any
consider.
of those without the contrary?
I usually we consider the heroes to be people that go out and stop murder, that stop rape, that stop these heinous things from happening in the world. Those we consider the good acts. We don't consider the punishments necessarily good acts. We consider the punishment necessary evils to prevent those people from committing evil acts in the future. Like, we don't consider punishment to be a good act. We consider those to be
Really?
necessary evils.
You
Typically,
think
yeah.
justice is evil?
They're necessary evils to prevent other harms from happening
I
in
think I would
society.
disagree
Typically,
with that, Oz. I would say that sort of, stuff like penal functions are good for society.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I
it's a
think
consequentialist.
the broader point here is that if there are things that are good, but they're only good in the presence of evil, that is, they're only good in virtue of evil, then it would follow that a world without evil, that you don't have these things, but that world would still be better because you don't have evil that needs to be responded to with good, you just have good. And so a world without evil is still a better world than one that contains evil and thereby
Well,
contains goods that only exist in virtue of evil. But I don't think those justify the occurrence of the evil. The evil should still not be occurring. And I think
You don't
that
have-
God would
goes back to
recognize
the-
that. And so would
I
go
agree.
to the root of the evil rather than allowing it so that he can like exemplify his glory.
Well, what do
If
you
he
think the
didn't
root
want
of the
humans to
evil
sin,
is?
then they wouldn't.
What,
Human
why is the
psychology.
goal that to have ultimate good without evil.
Yeah,
Well,
What
what's the
here's
fun
the
of that?
problem.
is
Here's the
good?
problem. If we're made in God's image and God is capable of doing evil, then we're capable of doing evil.
No, I never
And
said
there,
God was capable of doing evil. That's not the Christian perspective.
I would actually agree with that. I don't know what it would mean for God to do evil.
or well, God creates evil, I think was the
Well,
sentiment
yeah,
made.
I mean,
Yeah, that also
if
doesn't
God
make
wipes
sense.
out the entire world's population except for 8 people, those people who are dying would call God evil.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
No, they would be dead.
Well, yeah.
As
Fair
they're
enough.
But
dying.
as an internal
they are
critique, they
running
would
from a
survive
giant
death.
tsunami of water.
They would curse God all the way down to the depths. Absolutely.
Get you here. If I believe that story was true, if I believe that story was true, and God made me with a moral compass, I judge God as evil based on the compass He created me with.
How so?
Because
Moral
you don't
intuition.
kill people.
Because he did something that ought not to happen or
Well,
occur. all
what's the
things
difference
considered.
between justified killing and murder? I mean, is there such thing as a justified killing?
Murder is
Absolutely.
definitionally unjustified killing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a legal term. Yeah.
You don't kill children.
Well, but that's not like some universally true statement. I can think of instances where you ought to kill children, all things considered.
In what cases?
In a case where
little
aliens
before.
came to Earth and said, we're wiping all life off this planet if you don't murder these 2 children.
Oh, you can take.
Yeah, I
children
would
as
say
well,
you
though.
ought to kill those children, all things considered in that instance.
I'm not a
take children before.
consequentialist, but maybe.
Neither am I.
I would agree.
Stephen King's horror novel where these kids come
Nothing
and
that I said
kill
has
all
to do
the
with
adults.
consequence, by the way.
Yeah.
I would probably
Sorry?
kill the 2 children, but it is sort of a consequentialist.
So,
I don't see
Could
how.
I ask Mark Stoney another question?
Sure.
Well, Issa wanted to say
God-
something real quickly
Yeah,
first.
okay,
Issa, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say just about the children. I mean, we've had a lot of science fiction and horror, fantasy horror stuff like the Children of the Damned, where like these alien kids like want to kill all the adults, and you have like Children of the Corn where they like sacrifice all the adults to He Who Walks Through the Rose. Like, I mean, there's a lot of horror where you have like these kids who want to kill all the
Do
adults.
terrible things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I mean, like,
it's
I don't agree with it. I
a realistic
personally
example
don't
at
are.
last. Yeah.
But
Well,
you get
these
the
stories
point.
are all written by adults as well, so consider
Okay,
that.
But it's like a fantasy.
and outside the bounds of fantasy, there are cases where you have to use deadly force for self-defense against children. I understand there are some of those cases that are extremely rare, but you should side on the side of we should try to protect the child's life.
Of course.
And we should try not to kill other adults either. I'm for that. But like even in war, we try not to kill children. Like
But
so,
sometimes
unless you're
God.
have to.
Israel.
Unless you're Israel.
Okay.
Well, I think he was saying
Yeah.
we as in
Well,
moral.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Likud
people.
Party. So
God, as an arbiter of whatever, could have spared the children in the flood. Could
You're
have
talking
spared
about-
the children with the Pharaoh. Did not have to kill the children.
You're talking about the same God that like got like what was it, a bear or a buffalo or something to maul like 40-something children from mocking a bold dude. Hey Mark,
Yeah.
how would you
Bears.
feel if God like mauled a
It was
bunch
a
of children like
she-bear
an animal
specifically.
because they
it was
were
a female she-bear.
Well,
That's great.
Mhm.
But how would
So-
you feel if a God sent to like maul to death a bunch of children because they were mocking you because you had no hair? Would you feel better about yourself, Mark?
No,
Probably not. No, I think that would be an extreme overreaction, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But,
See, Mark is a moral person.
Mark Reid, I'm about to have to go. So if I could just ask Mark, just a
Yeah.
couple
Sorry.
quick
Go
questions.
ahead, Rodney. Sorry. Mate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mark Stoney, do you believe Scripture when it says that all things are created by God and for God?
yes.
Would this include confusion?
God is not the author of confusion, no.
So God did not create confusion.
He is
What?
the creator, not the author. He's not the practicer of it. He's the creator of
Okay.
all things.
So he
But just
created
because
confusion
God-
for his glory.
Sure.
Okay. So could God have done things differently than they've been done now, so that they would be less confusing, and so that he would get more glory from more people than what he gets now?
I don't see that as a well-formed question. I see it as kind of a straw man, because God did the things the way he said he did. He set the
Uh-huh.
laws the way he set them, and whether we like it or not, we break God's laws. I mean, I do too. I'm not innocent by any means, but that doesn't indicate God in my sin. Sure, he gave me access to the ability to commit lawlessness, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to choose that route.
Okay, and once again, all things made by God for God, and this necessarily being for his glory, as you say, then confusing things that are confusing that God does would necessarily be for his glory.
Well, what in your mind is confusing about what God does?
Well, I also want to point out, and I just want to reference something in what is it, Second Thessalonians? It says that God will send a powerful delusion so people will believe a lie. How do you square that away with sort of God creating delusion and sending delusion, but not being the author of confusion?
Okay, I gotta go, Mark. I'll see you guys later.
Yeah. Sorry,
Alrighty.
Rodney. Take care, mate. Thanks so much for
Deuces.
coming in.
Take care.
Do you want me to find the scripture for you?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. My headset cut out. I'm back now.
Okay. So I want to point out that in Second Thessalonians, it says that God will send a powerful delusion that the people of unrighteousness should believe a lie. So how can God be the creator of confusion and send delusions that people believe lies, but not be an author of confusion?
Well, because God has chosen his elect from the foundation of the world, and he's not going to make a way for people that he has not chosen to come to his saving grace. We read in Romans 9 about it says God will have mercy on whom he will have mercy, and whom he hardeneth. And the question to that is, thou wilt say unto me, why does he find fault? For who has resisted his will? And then God answers, nay, but O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus?
Okay, so there's people that God will support by giving them the truth, and people that God will not support, and then they're not elect. He will send them a delusion so they believe lies.
Yep.
Why are they to blame for not believing then?
Well, they're made the way they're made. Paul is echoing that in Romans 9. It says, what if God, willing to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath fitted to destruction, and that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he had afore prepared unto glory. So God, in his infinite wisdom, has seen through the lenses of time who will and who will not come to him, and he draws those who will, and those who will not, he lets them continue on in their unbelieving ways.
Well, no, it doesn't say that. It says he sends them a powerful delusion so that they believe the lie.
Sure.
But that suggests that without the delusion, they wouldn't have believed the lie.
Right.
So how is that not confusing people in order for them to believe a lie?
Because they're not his elect. They're not meant to believe the truth.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because you've sort of said, hey, he doesn't author confusion, and he's going to send a delusion so these unelect will be confused and believe this lie. Those two things don't square with one another.
Well, that's not confusing to me at all, because God has chosen who is chosen, and those whom
What
he
do you
has
mean it's
not
not
chosen.
confusing to you? I'm saying it's confusing to the people who are being given a delusion so that they believe a lie. surely it's confusing to them.
Well, let me ask you this: are you confused
Confused by what?
by God?
A little,
Yes.
yeah. I'm very confused by why God wants a lot of the things that he wants, why he takes actions in the Bible that he takes, why he tells people not to murder and then orders them to murder a whole bunch of people. Yeah, no, I'm very confused.
Well, you're interchanging murder and justified killing there.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not confused at all. To me, it's false. It's not confusing.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like in an internal sort of critique, it's
Sure.
very confusing. Why sort of it's claimed that God gives you free will and then hardens the Pharaoh's heart, for instance. That's confusing, sort of in an internal critique, to go, well, what's that about?
Well, let's talk about free will then. What is the extent of this free will? Is it deterministic free will? Is it libertarian free will? Is it agency? Where's the delineation here?
I don't know. I'm never
Sure.
claimed God gives us free will, so I don't know what that would be.
Well, I would claim that we have agency. I would say that we act within the confines of our nature. I
Right.
like to use the illustration: if you set, a steak in front of a lion and a salad, what is that lion going to choose? He's going to choose the steak every time. But it's not up to the lion to determine his nature, and that's the nature of man. We don't get to determine our nature. We don't get to determine our proclivities. That's for God to determine. But we operate and choose things within our nature. And
I don't believe that.
you don't have to. I'm not asking you to. I'm telling you this is the biblical perspective.
No. I'm not that much of a determinist, I guess, or a fatalist, I guess you should say. I just want to respond when you're done. Sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
So I believe that we evolved to have some type of ability to deliberate between choices internally, that we are not just a product of our biology, that we also are a product of our nurturing and education, that we can form like algorithms within our brain to deliberate between multiple choices, that we don't always have to select the steak, that sometimes we can select the salad, that sometimes we can,
Sure.
sometimes we can select against what our normal preferences are, because we can go through these algorithms. It's not to say that we could go back in time and potentially select something different. I don't know if that's the case. It seems to be determinism is true, but we do have some type of selective process that we can nurture. We can build some type of some form of compatibilism, maybe. I'm more of a hard determinist when it comes to that, but I do believe with that hard determinism is a ability to deliberate that we can nurture, if that makes any sense.
I have no issue with anything you just said.
Okay. I don't think it comes from God, but whatever.
He's really talking that he thinks that free will is compatible with a deterministic universe. So we know that things are deterministic in, say, physics and things like that. But we seem to have a selection process when it comes to our decisions to go through multiple variables and make some sort of selected process between them. Now, that might be an illusion, but, I'm not sure. I can't say for sure. So it sounds like you're a compatibilist, Oz?
I would say I'm a determinist. I'm sort of becoming softer on the claim of being a determinist.
Sure.
But Penrose, famously argues something about friggin' quantum indeterminism when it comes to whatever part of the brain. He's not a neuroscientist.
Trash.
Yeah, he's not a neuroscientist, and I'm not a physicist. So why either of us are saying shit about free will, I have no clue. But
I think Sam Harris had a lot to say on free will, and he was sort of in the determinist camp. That the brain makes decisions, and then the consciousness tries to sort of justify why it made that decision, kind of thing. But I'm not entirely convinced like that, and there's a lot unknown about the brain, so I'm not entirely on board with that.
there is a lag between our body knowing when it's going, our body physiology being aware of it making a decision before us being consciously aware that we made a decision. So our body physiologically is going to throw the ball before we're consciously aware we're going to throw the ball. It's like 100 millisecond lag between the two. Before we're consciously aware, we're going to press a button or write something down.
Yeah, but that's sort of innate stuff kind of thing. That's you know, I'm sort of talking about more type 2 decisions kind of thing rather than just sort of muscle memory. I'm not sure, like what you're describing sounds sort of like type 1 decision making to me.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah, you're talking about throwing a ball, writing something.
Right.
That the physiological, like they're sending the signals to your hand before you're even consciously aware that you want to write something down or press a button.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm sort of, I lean towards compatibilism, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. But it seems like we can spend time, we can make a conscious effort to spend time to deliberate on different things. And it seems like that there's something, and so it to me it seems like the more time we spend pre-deliberating on potential future actions, when that future response is required, when we have to make that snap decision, that role playing we did in the past seems to be more apt to be the instinctual response that we respond with in the future. But that still seems like determinism. Like we pre-programmed ourselves in the past to respond some way in the future. So I don't know. But we're off in the weeds now.
Can I respond to a comment
yeah.
made in the side chat?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So Pragmatic Crystal says Stanford neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky believes humans have no free will. I don't care what he believes. By studying baboons in Africa and human behavior for decades, he's concluded neurochemical influences determine human behavior. That's true. That is the case. That still doesn't refute the fact that humans have volition.
Right.
That's the whole point of compatibilism.
Yeah. So the point is, do we hold humans morally culpable for their actions? So if hard determinism is true, then it seems like we ought not to hold people morally culpable for their actions. If compatibilism or free will is true.
I disagree. I completely disagree. I think it's easier to have moral standards and violate those moral standards if hard determinism is true, because we can say when a computer is not doing what it ought to do.
I agree.
Right? We can say, hey, that is malfunctioning. It's not what it ought to do. So if there is determinism, say along a scientific or evolutionary line, we can say, hey, that human that's going around killing people, it ought not to be doing that.
So
it's
do you
malfunctioning.
Well, the point is, do you treat it as a malfunction, or do you punish them? So,
well, yeah, there's a good question. I think that you can't punish them, and I think that's where rehabilitative justice is going to be a lot better, not only for the outcome, but because under hard determinism, that person is more malfunctioning than sort of choosing to do something that's morally wrong.
But
it's still morally wrong.
Yeah. So if libertarian free will is true, then it seems like they intentionally chose to do the moral evil. And so how do you respond to a moral evil? It's not a malfunction at this point, because you're sort of like presuming that they, as long as they don't have like some mental defect, right? I think even people that believe in libertarian free will accept mental defects exist. I hope so. Maybe not all of them do, but yeah, that you I know, but that you punish them, right? That you need to like, and then there's different methods of that too. There's like vigilantism. There's like, and it seems like I don't know if did you ever go through those lectures I sent about more free will versus determinism by
No, I don't think so.
It's like 24 hours. They're really good. I'll have to find them again.
Okay,
but they go over the different. They go over the different things.
we're way off topic, and this is all Mark asked was, you know, do you think people have free will? And we are so far down the rabbit hole.
Good
So essentially, Mark, I think I've got to say, from our perspective, we don't know. Oh, I don't know. I think I do. I sort of, that my actions suggest I do, but I don't know for sure, is what I've got to tell you.
Well, we certainly have a will. I don't like the word free will because that intrinsically implies that it's free from something. But what would that be free from? Or past events? No, of course our decisions are made by, are influenced by past events. They're influenced by genetics. They're influenced by our nurture, environment, everything. So ultimate free will, or this libertarian free will, I think is a pipe dream. I mean, none of us really have that.
Free will is kind of incoherent.
I do believe that we have agency within the confines of our nature and our own desires. We can choose the things that we see as pleasing to ourselves, and within that subset of things that are pleasing to us, we will make those choices. Can we act outside of that will? Absolutely, but that doesn't take away from our agency, because we're still making that choice. We're still responsible for the choices that we make, but there is a limit to the choices that we can make. I can't just up and decide to be a helicopter one day. You know, my free will, my deterministic will is not potent enough to do that. I mean, I could want to be a millionaire. I could want to go on a lavish vacation, but there's things that would have to happen outside of my control for that to occur. So is it determinism? I don't know. Is it free will? Absolutely not. Do we have agency? For sure.
Well, I don't like the way you sort of go with pleasing to us, because there are things that we do that ought to be done that certainly aren't really pleasing to us, kind of thing. I'm not sure I would get along with that sort of quotation. I think that there's a lot of things that are unpleasurable that we know have to be done. Like it's a necessity rather than a want to do it.
But there's a benefit in there for us.
Yeah, usually
want to call it a
sort of benefit. I think there's, I mean, you're sort of looking at sort of extreme altruism through selfishness kind of thing as well. Like that the only reason people do something good for others is because they feel good about themselves, you know, and I'm not sure I'm completely on board with that. I think people can do good without getting some sort of reward.
I think you're reducing everything to like one psychological state, and it's sort of reductive. I think we have multiple psychological states, including altruism, including to be selfishness. So we have multiple desires, multiple influences that tug at us multiple directions that determine what type of choices and decisions we make. Is just not. That's why I reject objectivism, like Ayn Rand. It's way too reductive.
I reject Ayn Rand.
Yeah, basically. Well, I think the problem with a God is that, like, if I'm going to make a decision and God already knows the outcome of that decision, I don't see how in any possible world that I would make any other decision. I don't understand, if God knows everything that I'm going to do, how I actually have free will and not just the illusion of free will, because I can't choose anything else.
But why not? I mean, what are these choices? Are these the kind of choices that, you know, impact like a day-to-day existence, or like a lifelong decision?
And I don't believe in a God at all, so it doesn't impact me in the slightest. But I'm really addressing the claim that God allows free will, yet sees every outcome to every possible decision made. Because if God knows that I'm going to pick up a pen and I'm going to write tits on my pad here, is there anything I can do to change that happening?
No, there isn't. You should totally write tits on your pad right now.
I already have.
Show it. So no, there's your answer to your question. No, if you've already done it, if it's already been done, then no, there's nothing you could have done about it.
Right. So is that really free will?
Is it?
Did I write
we're looking at
my
something
own free
past.
will?
Did you?
Did I what?
Did you write it on your own free will?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking you. This is
Do you feel
your
like you were
worldview, not
compelled
me.
to do it? I don't think decisions like that are really relevant to the argument. And we're not talking about writing something on paper. We're talking about eternal salvation. I think we can go left, right, this way, and the other within our Christian walk and still get to the final goal, which is to believe in Christ all the way to death.
Well, hang on a second. Hang
But I
on,
can
hang on, hang
do
on,
a
hang on.
myriad of
Hang on,
things.
Mark.
here
When
and
you
there.
say our Christian thing, you're not talking about me. I'm not a
No,
Christian.
okay. Yeah, sure. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what I'm sort of saying is this sort of claim that God knows everything that's going to happen. And the idea that I have free will, is that logically compatible? When I think about it, I think no, it can't be, because if God can see what I'm going to do in the future, there is no other choice I can make.
But is that a decision that you made that's deterministic in any way? Is that going to affect your day tomorrow that you wrote, tits on a piece of paper? No.
No.
Your day tomorrow is going to be just as it is. It's going to be a day where you wake up, you brush your teeth, hopefully, and do your thing.
But I wouldn't have decided to. That's already written.
You'll
tomorrow probably never give a second thought of writing on that pad.
Well,
is what I'm saying.
Tomorrow is happening
in the future.
No, tomorrow's happening determined by him writing tits on the piece of paper. You don't know the opportunity costs of him writing tits on the paper. Something else could happen tomorrow if he wrote pop on the paper. We don't know what the opportunity cost.
Sure.
Unless you appeal. Yeah, the counterfactual is, unless you're appealing to fatalism, which is a little bit different. Fatalism is the idea that there's specific events that happen, that the things like writing tits on a piece of paper aren't those significant events that are going to happen. Some people conflate fate with determinism, but in philosophy, they're a little bit different concepts.
Sure.
And you should listen to that series I posted under the private chat. It goes under fatalism and determinism and those different concepts there. Very good series. I do want to answer your question, Mark, at some point.
You'd want to answer my question?
Yeah, you asked a question way back at the beginning.
There's too many all these in this room.
What question? Answer.
Why do all these silly atheists do these things?
Oh yeah. I never got a roundtable on that. Yeah, go for it, and then I might wrap up, because I think it's been a really good discussion, and it seems like a really good place to leave off. And I didn't even have to use my my rage breaker, which was great. I made a rage breaker just in case anyone got too angry. Does anyone want to see it?
Please.
Yes,
oh yeah.
absolutely.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Wow.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Sorry, my headphones turned up. Was that too? Oh wow! I just blasted Oz's ears out.
Oh.
No, it was perfect. I love it.
I
can't wait.
I'm not getting sound from Oz. He's trying to show something. I'm not getting sound.
I can't wait. We actually have to use that.
Sorry?
Okay. Why do I engage in debate on atheism? Yeah. Okay. First of all, because I think it's a serious topic. I find myself lately doing more Christian apologetics than I do arguing for atheism. Like in my Nadir debate. What the heck? Like he's arguing against Christians. Like, and I'm an atheist. What's going on here, Nadir?
I remember that. It was so fucking hilarious.
Well, and he also shoots himself in the foot. Nadir, and this is a problem I see with certain folks, like Christians and Muslims, and like Christians. You can't attack Judaism. And I really like that Mark Stoney was like, the Hebrew Bible. He gave a lot of respect to the Torah. I see some Christians who will like throw the Torah under the bus, and I'm like, you do realize that's the whole premise of Jesus, is this text of the Torah. It says he's the king of the Jews. You know what I mean? So like, it's so weird when I see that. And it's the same thing with Muslims. I'm like, Muslim folks, you can't throw the Torah and the Gospels under the bus. You can't insult these texts because the whole premise of Islamic theology is you got to believe in them. You can try to say, well, there's things that I don't understand in these texts, but you can't throw them away. They're critical. And then also, if a person tries to say, well, they're actually corrupted, I've heard this argument in Arabic, they call it tahrif. They say the text is corrupted. I said, did God corrupt these texts? Well, then you have a lot of trouble then. It's not a smart theological maneuver. So I'm like, don't do it. But I see folks doing it all the time, and I'm like, this is dumb.
That was just my preamble really quick. So I wrote a book like a year ago called Beyond Faith by Ozian Talks. It's published on Amazon Kindle. It's free if you got Kindle Unlimited for the digital copy of the book. It has an Audible book. It's like $4 for the Audible. No, maybe it's like $10 for the Audible, but it's about atheism, like my justification for why I am an atheist and why I believe God doesn't exist. I'm working on a couple other books. One's sort of like a fiction book, and one's sort of like a second book in that series on atheism. So it's important for me to justify why I believe a God doesn't exist, and not just to argue from a skeptic's point of view, because I don't think skepticism provides a grounding for knowledge and stuff like that. So I view myself as more of a pragmatic naturalist, if that means anything to anybody on stage. I think some of you, it does mean something too. I find myself arguing with flat earthers a lot, and a lot of them are making claims, and people that deny evolution, they're arguing that evolution, abiogenesis, and the flat earth falsify the existence of God, falsify Christianity. And it sounds like Mark Stoney isn't making those claims, so that's good. You know, I think you talked about Adam and Eve, and that may falsify abiogenesis, but that's a different story. Anyways, just that's why I do it, because I think it's important to have good arguments, and that's why I engage in this.
Okay, is there anything else you want to add, Oz, as sort of a wrap up?
No, there was a couple other things that we talked about, but they're gone. So about, like, you talked about animism was like 60,000 years old, whereas they were talking about, somebody mentioned like Sumerian religions were like the first religions or something 6,000 years ago. But as far as we know, religion has probably existed as long as humans have had some form of communication. So we don't know how old religion is with humans.
It's about 60,000 years old. That's
yeah,
how far
as far
back
as we know,
religious practices go.
Right. As far as we know, 60,000 years.
Fair enough. Who was next on the agenda? Isa, you wanna? I'll just go from left to right, and we'll go through.
Well, I think this is a super interesting topic. I kind of jumped in, so I was not exactly prepared with a kind of
no, I got you, mate. Yeah, no,
response. But I love talking about this subject. I think it's really interesting, and it's interesting to see the kind of thought processes that go through this. You know, I definitely think it's, so for me, I try to take a position of humility. If I try to take a position that some folks do, then I think I would strive to get logical coherency and consistency, but I think it's a big difficulty because there's a lot of hula hoops that you have to jump through. So I think it's difficult. So usually for my own personal analysis of this topic, I try to take a more humble position on it and say, you know what, I don't know the answers. It's beyond my pay grade, and that's where I stay with it. Peace and blessings.
No problem at all. Mark Stoney, do you want to add some final words before we head off for the night? Are you still muted, Mark? Do you want me to unmute you, or you can unmute yourself, I think.
Oh, I got it. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for inviting me. Thanks for hosting this. This was a lot of fun. It was a joy to meet you guys. Look forward to talking to you some more in the future.
No problem at all. Leo, would you like to contribute to your final words, or any final thoughts? Final words. It makes it sound like you're dying, doesn't it? You know, like your
Any
last
words? Honestly, no. Surprisingly.
Okay. No problem at all. Deviant Outcast, is there anything you wanted to add before you were ripped to pieces by wild bears?
I don't really know. Not really. I mean, why do I take part in these discussions?
Good question.
I'm from
I'm
Sweden.
interested in humanity. I'm interested in understanding other people. It's always been kind of an enigma to me, how people interact, how they think, how they function. It's one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, to me choosing to become an Egyptologist and then an archaeologist. It's
Did you say optometrist?
it's something so deep. Sorry?
Egyptologist and archaeologist.
Oh, my bad. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
No worries.
It's at the heart of how we interact with others. And I often feel that these discussions sometimes, or maybe most of the time, instead of trying to further our own way of thinking, they become this, I'm right, you're wrong, or you're right, I'm wrong. That's more, not as often. Instead of trying to grow something, it doesn't have to, I'm not necessarily looking to change my mind, but I'm looking to grow my mind. And how do you do that if you don't understand how other people look at the world? And religion is kind of central, whether or not you're a believer, which I'm obviously not, or maybe it's not obvious, but I'm not. So ramble over, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really glad
you're
to be
very
here.
welcome.
I'm glad I noticed this was today.
Hi, I'm from Sweden.
I'm from Sweden, ja.
Yeah.
Hör
I
du,
love
försök att
Swedish
prata
people.
mitt språk, ska vi se hur bra det går för dig, va?
No, sluta
Håll
snacka
tuff.
skit. That's the
That's
only
glad
thing
I
I know
got the
how to say
reaction
in
that I did.
Swedish.
That was beautiful.
That was so
That's the-
stereotypical.
That's the only thing I know how to say in Swedish, Deviant, and I hope I said it correct.
I'm very impressed, I have to say. I wasn't aware you knew any Swedish.
That's the
But you
only
kind of
thing I
learn
know.
Kind
But
of the
it's
sentence
applicable
theme.
to so many situations, I've been told. So
I can speak
is.
Swedish. I can speak
Yeah.
Swedish too. Hergider Gisleben Schloven.
Wow, that's just offensive.
You sound like a Muppet.
Are you very?
That's
No,
what he's
I
doing.
got
He's doing the Swedish chef, you know.
Swedish chef, that's
Yeah. And, Siddharth, now, do you want to add some final words or any final thoughts before we kick off? Siddharth? Siddharth?
Muted.
Siddharth?
I think he said skip him. His mic's not working.
Okay. All right. No worries at all. Well,
But he
just
did
as a
say
final
thank
thing.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Just as a final thank you, we've also got a super chat from, again, the lovely Robin Webster for $2 American. Thanks, Mr. and Mark Stoney. And just on that note, I was going to say, no, hey, stop that, Leo. Don't make me put you in the naughty corner. So it's really hard to go into a room. And this is the thing that I wanted to show other theists, it's hard to go into a room where everybody disagrees with you. It's really difficult. And, I got to say, Issa and Mark came in and they, represented their beliefs very well. And we disagree, and that's okay. But it is still very hard to sort of have people make you the center of all the questions and things. You want to plug Matters Now?
We welcome you all at Matters Now too. We have Christians, theists, Muslims all the time, and man, to get like an archaeologist on, oh my goodness!
They accept everybody unless you're Polish.
Unless you're Leo.
Unless you're Leo, then Leo's not welcome.
You know what's funny though, Ozian? I have some Polish in me, so I'm right.
Yes.
Hey. Well, here's the thing. Like, why do we debate God? Why do we talk about God if we're atheists? And the reason why I do it is because I think that a belief in God is detrimental to the world we live in. I think that it takes away so much from our own authority to think that a lot of the stuff is done by a supernatural agent. And that's just my belief. I don't begrudge anyone else their beliefs, but that's what I think. I also think that a lot of the things that we are that affect us in our lives are as a result of maybe not a God, but a religion. And a religion is a structure of people that believe in a God. So, there's things in my country like prayer before Parliament, which I think should not be there in a secular nation.
Oh, that's fucked up.
Indeed. There's a lot of people pushing a lot of different ideas because of their religion, and other religious people might not share those ideas. So I may not be as as harsh with them about their beliefs. Like, if people have compatible morals, I don't really mind if they believe in a God. It doesn't really worry me. But it's the people that do and are doing horrible things to my friends and to my loved ones and to the people that I care about is the reason why I want to discuss this, whether they do have the authority or whether we can talk about, representing everybody in our society. I think it's a big issue. And let's not face it, if a God does exist, then it's the most important thing in the world. And I can't say for sure that a God doesn't exist, but I don't believe one does. I believe there's no gods.
Even if a God existed, I'd still say climate change is more important because that God is clearly not doing anything about it.
Well, yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and I agree.
I was going to say
Noah's flood.
But inaction on climate change is also affected by people that believe in a God, that think that God is going to take care of it. And I think that's downright dangerous because God doesn't seem to have taken care of any of our other problems in the past. So aside from sort of, if we just go by what has happened in the past, it seems that we need human solutions to these problems, not a God solution. So,
I totally agree there, Mark, if I could real quick. I think it's silly for people to just expect God to fix all our problems. That's never at all in any scripture. Right. That's not the expectation. As a matter of fact, we were put on this earth to be stewards of this earth, and the fact that we're damaging our climate, our environment the way that we have is indicative of our fallen nature. But it's up to people like us to speak truth to it and actually do something about it.
Our fallen nature.
Dr. J, who's a Christian, he's a Christian pastor, PhD in theology, comes on my streams all the time. He's passionate, outspoken about climate change. He wants to do streams every week on climate change.
Again.
You guys, to do something about climate change.
Okay.
He's all for
That's what I thought.
the thing that Biden did last year to address climate change. I can't remember what the bill was that they did. It doesn't matter.
There's the American Rescue Plan. There was the Inflation Reduction Act.
Inflation Reduction Act that Biden did. He thinks that's going to help reduce greenhouse emissions.
It'll do something. I'll say that. I'll grant it that much. It'll do like a tiny little bit.
Yeah, he wants to do more. We've done a couple episodes on that. I think we should do more, and we should spend more time. I agree with you totally, Leo. We need to talk more about climate change.
Hell yeah.
Okay, definitely. But thank you for coming, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you to all of my readerships and reading room members who I'd never be able to do this without. I want to thank every single person on here: Ozian, Rodney, Tell Me More, Better Truth, Issa, Kabir, Deviant Outcast, Mark Stoney, and of course the absolutely famous Leophilius, who is amazing, and Siddharth Nair, who I just forgot because I don't have a website, but you know, we'll see, we'll cover that when it comes to it. Please do like and subscribe; it helps me out a huge amount. And I want to thank you for coming and listening to what turned out to be a really good discussion.
I fucking
Don't
love
forget.
the name Siddharth.
Okay.
Oh shit! I'm not muted. I'm so sorry.
No, you're not. No, you're not. But you know, thank you for your unfiltered thoughts, Leo. Always a pleasure. Don't forget to be kind to yourself. It's a rough world. Climate change is a thing. Sorry, it just is. It's a rough world. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to those around you. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.